Chapter 2126. Where exactly did this girl go? Amy hugged the chips, and said to the three of them, "Take whatever you want. It's my treat." Annie took a bag of Snickers from the pile of snacks. She would feel hungry sometimes when she was drawing late at night. After eating one of these, she was no longer "you're not you when you're hungry." Irina took a bag of Wolong spicy strips. She didn't eat junk food usually, but this spicy strip seemed to have some kind of magic. She stole a bag of it from Amy's snack gift package previously. Oh, it couldn't be considered as stealing, since it was her daughter's snacks. She took it legitimately. Mag didn't like to eat snacks. After watching Amy keep all the snacks in the magic wand and informing the other three, he left the tavern to place a bamboo container under the locust tree at the alley's entrance. The news regarding Thulhu and the army of the dead had already spread to all the races on the Norland continent. As for the news regarding Rankster, Mag didn't choose to hide it after serious consideration. Rankster was too powerful. Even the current Mag wasn't confident that he could beat him. It would be a disaster to the Allied forces if he concealed such a powerful combat force. He also couldn't rescue Rankster from his current controlled state. Even with Xeyes intervening, she could only rescue Mag's party from Thulhu and the army of the dead's ambush. Elizabeth had already left the restaurant. He didn't know if she had received this news. Mag knew very well what Rankster meant to Elizabeth. If she knew about him, she would definitely rush to the ice plain in the north before the Allied forces took on the army of the dead. This was what Mag worried about the most. Perhaps, Rankster might still have a hint of consciousness left, but Thulhu had complete control over him in the ice plain. Even Elizabeth's appearance in front of him might not let him recover his consciousness. What was more plausible was that she could be torn apart by the wandering army of the dead before she could even see Rankster. Therefore, he wanted to use the Chaos City's intel networks to find Elizabeth and stop her. Irina saw Mag returned home with a worried look, so she gently asked, "Are you worried about Elizabeth?" Mag nodded. With a gentle sigh, he said, "Yes. I'm afraid she would turn into someone like Rankster if she appeared in the ice plain in the north now." Irina shook her head, and replied, "She's very smart. I believe she won't get herself in danger." "I certainly hope so. I've got Chaos City to help look for her. At the critical moment, her presence could perhaps help us deal with Rankster easier." Mag could only wait for the news now. He still had to return to Chaos City to attend the racial meeting tomorrow. He hoped he would receive good news then. "Oh, yes. How's the situation in the Wind Forest now?" "In the current situation, adding me, are you confident in taking over the City of Life?" Mag asked Irina. "I've been suspicious about why Helena's attitude became so gentle suddenly. She even allowed the system that she created to disintegrate. Looking at it now, she's taking a step back to move forward." Irina shook her head. The chaos in the Wind Forest has gradually subsided now. The living environment of the elves in the lower classes has improved. Although some of the elven nobles have lost some of their privileges, they still maintain their excellent conditions in all areas. The initially sharp class contradiction was dissolved. The lowliest elven slaves have left the forest, so the basic condition to start a large-scale fight against oppression is already gone, Irina said, shaking her head. Mag also lamented, "It's indeed the older, the wiser." Helena appeared to back off and accepted the conditions, but she had never lost control over the elven race. She even dissolved the internal conflict in a gentle manner. Once the low-class elves accepted the current living environment, Helena and the nobles could change the conditions at any time. They had no way to resist that. This string had always been grasped by Helena. Mag had to admit that Irina and he were still noobs at power play. If it was his father who came, perhaps he could really spar with Helena and Andrei, those sly old foxes. Actually, there was another way to regain control over the elves, which was to kill Helena. However, in the current situation, not only would the other races not allow Helena to die and the elves to descend into a chaos, even Mag, who knew about Thulho and the army of the dead best, wouldn't do something like that to hurt themselves. Let's wait after this war is over. Currently, Thulho and the army of the dead are our most important opponents, Mag said. Irina nodded, and continued, but I intend to make a trip to the Wind Forest to get something tomorrow. All right. Mag nodded. He didn't probe. Golden Dragon Island, in the Golden Hall. How was it? Did you find Elizabeth? Louis asked all the golden dragons present. Jinx got up, shaking his head, and said, Chief, we have searched everywhere on the Norland continent, but we didn't see Elizabeth. All the other giant dragons shook their heads too. Where did this girl go? Louis furrowed his brows tightly. I wonder if the frost dragons are looking for her too. She's a frost dragon, after all. Perhaps, her counterparts should be able to sense her presence easier, Jinx lamented. I'm only afraid that they aren't looking for her at all. All right. Let's put this aside first. Regarding the racial meeting tomorrow, the Dragon Islands meeting yesterday has already reached a consensus. Douglas and I will go as the representatives. You guys will stand by on the Dragon Islands, and prepare to head north at any time. At the same time, all the frost dragons gathered at the Frost Hall looked solemn too. Great Elder, we still couldn't find Elizabeth, but we already posted our people at the edge of the ice plain. We should be able to stop her before she enters the ice plain, the third elder said to Douglas. Where exactly did this girl go? Douglas furrowed his brows tightly. I say we should ignore this stupid girl. I have long known that Rankster was no good. He always escaped unscathed in dire situations back then. I thought he was lucky, but in fact he has long become the devil's puppet. The giant dragons are all gossiping about us frost dragons now. They say we let the devil out, and they need to guard against us turning against them in battle, the second elder said angrily. All the elders present looked grave too. There had been plenty of gossip on the Dragon Islands in the last few days. The frost dragons were really in a dire situation. Shut up! Douglas flicked a glance at the second elder coldly. His terrifying aura even created frost in the air. I don't know how Rankster became the devil's puppet, but I don't see any problems with him becoming the chief. Furthermore, I'm telling you guys now that Elizabeth is the hope of us frost dragons. She's also the hope of us keeping our place among the top 10 dragon tribes. If we lose her again, you guys might have to get out of this island because none of you has the power to defend it, and you guys have been trying to kill the person who made it possible for you to stay here. Douglas' voice reverberated in the Great Hall. All the Frost Dragon elders went white, but they still had to agree with him in silence. Fox was a hopeless idiot. The Frost Dragons would only lose their status even faster on the Dragon Islands if he became the chief. We have to find her at all her costs, and then bring her back, Douglas ordered coldly. ******* The Boundless Sea Realm. The Demon Islands. An ancient grey castle towered next to the sea on the archipelago covered by grey fog. As an ancestor of the vampires, I should have the right to remove you from your position, right? Dracula sat at the main seat as he swirled a crystal glass filled with blood-red liquid, and smilingly spoke to the chief of the vampire race, Maynard. The upper echelons of the vampire race had gathered in the castle's hall, but the current ambience was a little stifling. Dracula, the vampire ancestor, had gathered them here today to discuss the re-election of the chief. Maynard had been the chief of the vampires for over 100 years. Everyone thought that his position would only be stabler after Dracula became the new ancestor. They didn't expect the first person to target him would be Dracula. What was even more surprising was that the other ancestor didn't attend the meeting. This meant that he wouldn't interfere with the meeting's outcome. This meant Maynard's chief position was completely decided by Dracula, and he could also appoint a new chief at will. At the same time, Camilla, who hadn't appeared on the island for a long time, was standing behind Dracula. This gave people ideas. Previously, Dracula receiving the ancestorship had a lot to do with Camilla being forced to marry. Maynard turned grave, but he still lowered his head, and respectfully said, "Yes, that is the ancestor's power." In the vampire race, the vampire ancestor had an absolute suppression over the other vampires with his ancestor bloodline. That was why the ancestor had a supreme status in the vampire race. The chief was only managing the race's daily affairs. The ultimate decision lay with the ancestor. Maynard was already very miserable as he failed to sell his daughter for gains, and even let Dracula become the vampire ancestor. He didn't expect he would lose his position as the chief today too. Some vampires began to plot. Although the chief's power wasn't as great as the two ancestors, the ancestors normally didn't manage affairs, so the chief was in fact the real controller of the vampires. If Maynard was deposed, who would become the new chief? Excellent. Seems like Big Brother still remembers our rules very well even after being the chief for so many years. Dracula smiled sinisterly. His gaze swept over the vampires present, and he loudly said, "Maynard's morals and behavior are appalling. He will be removed from the position of chief today, and Camilla will take over the position." Camilla. All the vampires' gazes landed on Camilla as they wore shocked expressions. Meanwhile, Camilla also looked taken aback. Obviously, she didn't know about Dracula's arrangement in advance. "I'm afraid that this arrangement isn't appropriate, right?" Maynard looked at Dracula and Camilla with an ugly expression. Camilla is still a child. She doesn't have much experience with the affairs of the race. We're in an eventful period right now. I'm afraid she will mess up if we let her take over the chief's affairs now. Many vampires nodded in agreement. Dracula swirled his red wine glass, and mockingly said to Maynard, "I'm afraid it's inappropriate to say that she's a child now, right? You know you had already forced her to marry twice for your benefits, right? Are you fit to be a father when you force a child to do such a thing?" Maynard's face twitched, and yet he couldn't rebut at all. "Uncle, you're awesome." Camilla looked at Dracula with little stars in her eyes. Only he would protect her like this in this life. As for that so-called father, perhaps he had treated her as a chip that could be used to exchange for benefits since she had been born. The other vampires finally realized that this was a family argument, so they quickly kept quiet. It was over for Maynard. Dracula wanted to put Camilla in the chief's position, and the other ancestor had already accepted it. The vampire race would enter the ruling period of Camilla. Maynard took a deep breath, and said to Dracula, "You're fooling around. I don't believe the Great Elder will agree with your decision." "Ha! Since he's not coming, it means that he has agreed with my decision." Dracula shook his head. Taking a sip of wine, he said to Maynard, "Dear Big Brother, I am no longer the little brother whom you could boss around. I hope the term fooling around will never appear in our conversation again." A terrifying aura emerged from Dracula. Fear appeared on Maynard's face, and his legs trembled. He couldn't control himself, and he knelt on the floor. Dracula kept his aura. Still with a teasing expression, he said, "Now, do you still have an opinion?" Maynard lowered his head, bit his lips, and replied, "And no, yes." Dracula was no longer that useless little brother whom Maynard had absolute control over. The absolute suppression of Dracula's bloodline and power made it impossible for him to resist. Camilla felt gratified with a hint of sadness when she saw Maynard kneeling on the floor. "Very good." Dracula nodded, and then said to all the vampires present, "Now, I declare Camilla as the new chief of the vampires. She will take on the position immediately. Greetings, Lady Chief." All the vampires bowed to Camilla. Camilla, who was still in a daze, quickly said, Please rise." She had never expected that. She thought she was just coming back with Dracula to throw her weight around. She didn't expect to take over the chief's position from her father. However, this homecoming sensation was fantastic. Looking at Maynard being dejected and submitted, she finally vented that seething feeling in her chest. She had once thought of never returning to these waters and castle, even if she had to wander forever. But Dracula brought her back, and gave her the foundation of life and more. The secretary came in, and reported, "Young mistress, the entire steam engine department was diverted into the study and production of cannons. The engineers and workers are very enthusiastic." Shear put down the documents, and looked up at the secretary. "Well done. Give all the engineers and workers 1 month of salary in advance. Give it to them tomorrow according to the previous standard." This was the city lord's castle's request. Shear already knew about the incident in the ice plain in the north of the Roth Empire. This was a matter that concerned the survival of all the races on the Norland continent. As a banker whose market was the Norland continent, she saw the opportunity under the crisis. All the races would meet in Chaos City tomorrow to discuss the matter. If things went as expected, they would sign a new peace treaty on the spot. This meant that if the Norland continent could get through the current crisis of the Devil and the Army of the Dead, it would welcome another 100 years of peace. This was an extremely precious opportunity. To the Buffett family, this concerned their life and death. Hence, she didn't hesitate at all when she got the city lord's castle's request, and diverted all her emirs and workers into the production of cannons. She might not be able to make any contributions at the front line, but with the Buffett's financial power, she still could do many things at the rear. "Oh, yes. Have you run tests on the firepower of the cannons?" Shear curiously asked. The city lord's castle didn't say where the cannon came from, but if City Lord Michael put such an importance on it, it should be rather powerful. The secretary took out a piece of information from his bag, and said, "The City Lord's castle has just run a test this morning. We got a report from them. A small caliber cannon's power was equivalent to that of an exploding fireball released by a third-tier magic caster. A medium caliber cannon's power was equivalent to that of an exploding fireball released by a fourth-tier magic caster, and a big caliber cannon's power was equivalent to that of an exploding fireball released by a sixth-tier magic caster. It can reach the power of a sixth-tier magic caster." Shear was rather shocked. Although a super big caliber cannon was considered as a steel giant, this was a tool that even an ordinary person could manipulate. This meant as long as there were ample numbers of super big caliber cannons, they could have the combat power of a batch of sixth-tier magic casters all of a sudden. This designer is a scary genius. Shear couldn't help but praise. She had seen the raw materials necessary to make a cannon. Although they were unusual, they were not expensive and rare. The goblins could provide them in abundance. However, no one could imagine that those assorted things could have such terafim power when they were pieced together. Meanwhile, those circular barrels gave those cannons the ability to fire at long range. However, if this weapon of mass destruction had appeared 100 years ago, the previous racial war would have been even more terafim. That designer had to have chosen this time to debut the cannon because he saw that the various races had decided to sign the peace treaty, and there wouldn't be a war in the next 100 years. Shear also admired the designer's foresight. Shear said to the secretary, "Recruit more blacksmiths in Chaos City. Pay them double and let them join the cannon-making team. We have to expand our output as much as we can." "All right." The secretary left quickly after receiving his order. Shear couldn't help but pace in the study. It was an eventful period, but it also was a great opportunity. If she could go along with it and grasp the chance, she might be able to create a huge business empire like her grandfather. The Moraton Manor. Gloria listened to Geoffrey explain the Norland continent's current situation with a grave expression. After a moment of silence, she said to Geoffrey, "Grandfather, I would like to donate all our cotton yarn and cloths to make winter wear for the soldiers who are going north to fight against the army of the dead." Surprise flashed through Geoffrey's eyes, but it soon became gratification as he nodded with a smile. "The cloth factory is already yours, you don't have to ask me whenever you make a decision. However, why are you doing this?" With a serious expression, Gloria said, "All the races are in a dire situation now. We can only survive by facing the crisis as one. We cannot go to the front line to kill the enemy, but we can do our part in the rear. Even if we can only provide a piece of winter wear for the soldiers, it's better than doing nothing at all." Geoffrey nodded with gratification. "That's right. This is a completely different crisis from 100 years ago, but it's also a rare moment in time when all the races on the Norland continent come together to fight against an enemy. If we win, the Norland continent will enter into another 100 years of prosperity, and it will trigger the conditions for all the races to intermingle. That would be a great age filled with imagination. It would also be the era that people of his generation would like to witness the most. However, this age was destined to belong to the youngsters." Geoffrey looked at Gloria with praise. He didn't have to worry about the Moreton family's legacy now. Gloria would definitely leave her own legend in the next generation. Mag didn't wait for too long before someone knocked at the door. "They're here." Mag got up to open the door. 4 young ladies who looked quite capable stood at the door. Mag smilingly said to the 4 maidens, "Hello, are you ladies here for the interview?" Smiling gently, the short-haired girl in the lead said, "Yes. Boss Eofi recommended us to come for an interview here." Mag stepped to the side, and said, "Please come in." The 4 maidens came in. Judging from their temperament and demeanor, they should be quite experienced. They knew what they were doing, and they looked at ease, making people feel rather comfortable. "Please take a seat." Mag poured them a glass of water each before sitting across from them with Irina. They were sizing up the 4 maidens who came for the interview, and the 4 maidens were also sizing up the young boss couple. They were supposed to go for an interview at Titan Tavern. They heard that Titan Tavern had just won the Liquor Tastings Events Gold Award, and its business was booming. However, Miss Eofi recommended them to this Saipan Tavern opposite. Apparently, this Saipan Tavern had gotten the Liquor Tasting Events Gold Award too, and it had no employees yet. The bosses needed manpower, and they gave quite a high salary. Mag spoke up first. "I'm Hades, the boss of Saipan Tavern. This is the lady boss. Can you guys do a short introduction first? It will be great to talk about your resume too." The maiden with short hair was the first one to reply. "I'm Jones, and I'm 18 years old this year. I have worked as a tavern and restaurant service staff for 5 years, and I was a small captain for 1 year." Chapter 2129. Don't tell me that you guys are thinking of letting me be the manager. One good thing about it was that Eofi had obviously chosen them in advance. The 4 maidens had good characters, and were down-to-earth people. The pros of employing experienced people was that they could start working right away. He didn't have to teach them slowly from the beginning. 30 minutes later, Mag smilingly said to the 4 of them, "You guys are fine. If you have no objections to the salary, you can start working tonight." "So fast?" The maidens were taken aback. A famous tavern like Saipan Tavern would usually have all kinds of requirements when they employed service staff. They didn't even have many hopes when they came. They didn't expect that they would all be hired. "Yes. This is your uniform. Come in them when you guys come to work tonight. Try it when you go back and see if it fits." Mag got up and took a few sets of red and black uniforms from behind the counter, and gave them to the 4 maidens. Mag had already thought it through. He couldn't be too demanding. As long as the service staff were willing to work hard, the rest was secondary. Saipan Tavern had already done most of its historical purpose, so he only needed to find someone who could continue to run the tavern on his behalf. He was already prepared to be a hands-off boss. Jones was the first to react. She took the uniform from Mag, and seriously said, "Yes. Thank you, boss. We'll work hard." "All right. I appreciate your help." Mag nodded and looked at Jones with appreciation. He rather liked this maiden. She was a natural leader and a good management candidate. The other 3 maidens also accepted the uniforms, and said thanks with an ecstatic expression. The boss was very generous, at least with the salary given. 5,000 basic salary with commission. Based on the daily sales of 100,000, their monthly salary could easily go over 10,000. This was what they usually didn't dare to imagine. It was considered very good for the usual service staff to have 3,000 copper coins of monthly salary. "Oh, yes, Jones, please stay back. I have some questions to ask you privately," Mag said to Jones, who was about to go out. "All right." Jones bade farewell to her companions, and returned to her seat. Mag got straight to the point, and said, "I intend to make you the team leader. As the management, your pay will be 2,000 copper coins more than the normal service staff, but you'll have to be responsible for arranging everyone's jobs and maintaining the team's proactiveness. Do you think you are up for the job?" Jones was slightly taken aback, but she quickly reacted. After pondering seriously for a while, she nodded solemnly, and said, "Thank you for trusting me, boss. I believe I can do this job well." Mag nodded and smiled. "All right. Then, come to the tavern an hour earlier today. I'll go through your job scope in detail with you." Jones nodded and then left. After the ladies left, Irina turned to ask Mag, "That's all? I know they are not as good as your elves, but they are already the better ones among the maidens who work as service staff in Rodu," Mag said helplessly. He had gone to the human resource market that day himself, and he couldn't even find a young lady, let alone experienced staff. Irina didn't say anything else after hearing that. Eofi knocked on the door. She stood at the doorway, and smilingly asked, "Mr. Hades, are you satisfied with the maidens?" She had seen the maidens leave excitedly on the second floor earlier, so she wanted to come over to ask Mag about the recruitment of his new staff. "If there's a need, I can recommend more people to you." Listen. If he was in a different place, Mag would definitely answer, "The next batch, please." However, it obviously wasn't appropriate now. After all, his wife was sitting next to him right now. "The ladies are great. Thank you for your concern, Miss Eofi. I've employed all of them," Mag answered with a smile. He was really grateful to Eofi. "I see. That's good." Eofi was surprised that Mag employed all of them. She felt gratified, though her heart was in pain. They were the most outstanding batch of maidens that she had found recently. They were nimble and of good character. They also could start work immediately, which could save her plenty of trouble. Mag said to Eofi, "Oh, yes. There's one more thing I would like to discuss with Miss Eofi. It's regarding Mela." Mela. Eofi's heart sank. Had Mr. Hades really taken an interest in Mela? He took her in as disciple yesterday, and he wanted to poach her from her today. Mag explained, "It's like this. My wife and I didn't have much interest in making money, and we don't like boisterousness. Although Saipan Tavern has just gotten on track, we already feel a little tired. So, we would like to find someone to take over the tavern while we continue our travels." Eofi only regained her wits after being dazed for a while. She exclaimed, "You mean, you don't want to run this Saipan Tavern anymore?" Mag smilingly replied, "I don't intend to close the tavern. I just want to find someone to manage it so we can be the hands-off bosses. So, don't tell me you guys have chosen Mela." Eofi had a weird expression. That girl. There was nothing else in her head apart from food, okay. She could make the tavern's business collapse at any time if you let her operate such a popular tavern. Mr. Hades was also a smart and dependable person. Why would he make such a rash decision? Mela has a good talent for cooking. I intend to teach her how to cook and supply the tavern's side dishes, and then let her manage the tavern." Mag nodded. "However, this matter will have to depend on Miss Eofi's attitude. After all, Mela has grown up with you, and you are just like her parent. Mela is kind-hearted. She doesn't have any bad thoughts." Eofi shrugged, and helplessly said, "But just because of that, her mind is relatively simple. She is more suitable to take orders like brewing liquor and cooking, but she isn't suitable to manage a tavern. This is beyond her capability." "Then, who does Miss Eofi think is the correct candidate?" "Saipan Tavern is one of the best taverns in Rodu now. Its business is booming, and its customers are varied. You need a manager who can control the situation and is capable, and someone like that." Eofi looked at Mag and Irina, who were smiling at her, cocked an eyebrow, and asked, "Don't tell me that you guys are thinking of letting me be the manager." "Miss Eofi, you are outstanding, of great character, and you have plenty of experience after managing a tavern for so many years. You're indeed the best candidate," Mag replied seriously. "But I still have to manage Titan Tavern," Eofi lamented. Mag continued, "I will continue to recruit more staff and establish a set of work regulations. Miss Eofi only needs to do the job of coordination and management. If Miss Eofi is willing to join, I will give 30% Saipan Tavern's shares to you, and we will be partners. I like you so much, but you just treat me as a tool? How sorrowful." Besides, once she accepted this arrangement, she probably would not see Mr. Hades and his family anymore. Whatever was left between them would be monetary ties. But under Mag's gentle gaze, she was unable to bring herself to say those hurtful words. She knew she had fallen in too deep. If it had been in the past, she would have definitely exclaimed, "Pa! Scoundrel!" Mag saw the conflicted look on Eofi's face, and said apologetically, "I know this is too much to ask for. Please do not take it to heart. Just take it that I've never said it." If he had not been in a rush to save the world, he would not have thrown the tavern out right now. After all, he had to be the vanguard for the fight against the army of the dead. "I'll have to consider it. After all, it's not a small matter," Eofi said with a smile. Mr. Hades's conditions were very enticing. Judging from Saipan Tavern's current profits, she just had to manage it to get 20% of its shares. All emotions aside, this was a huge sum of money. "All right." Mag nodded. Eofi was taking it seriously. That made him even more assured to hand the tavern over to her. It was still a multi-million business. Not just anyone could take over it. Eofi could be considered a professional in this industry. She had plenty of experience after years of running her tavern alone. As for Mela, it was just as Eofi had said. Mela was too simple. Getting her to manage the tavern was too much to ask for. "Young mistress, are we here so early for the free meal?" Mela held a cleaver in her hand as she asked Eofi a question softly while rubbing her sleepy eyes. "All you know is to eat." Eofi's face flushed red as she smacked Mela's head. "But we haven't had breakfast," Mela said with grievance as she took a step back. "I'm going to get cucumber soup. Do you want any?" Eofi asked. "Yes." Mela nodded immediately. It had been days since she last had it, and she was rather craving for it. "Master, I'll be back in a while," Mela told Mag before leaving with Eofi. Irina watched Eofi leave, and looked at Mag with a smile as she said, "It seems like she'd fallen for you." "Many have fallen for me, but I only have you in my heart," Mag said seriously. "Had. Glib talker." Irma rolled her eyes at Mag, but still could not help but smile. "Hell! Women!" Mag smiled to himself. There was nothing going on in the morning. Mag took out the stack of information that Fitch had handed to him. Many of the businesses that provided their information according to the requirements included strong contenders from the food and entertainment industry. However, aside from the pharmacy, what is the coffin shop doing here? They couldn't wait for someone to die from overdrinking so that they could choose a good coffin and bring it home with them? On top of that, 2 brothels caught Mag's eye. This was an era of legalized prostitution. Brothels were a legalized entertainment center for men to vent their extra energy. There were a few at Romo Street, but due to the loss of businesses in the entire street, the ladies were unable to get customers, and therefore they closed down. Now that Romo Street seemed to be making a comeback, the brothels set their eye on this land once again. Based on the pricing of Titan Tavern and Saipan Tavern, the customers drinking here had enough spending power, and they were a source of top-quality customers. Don't all men like this? Irina, who walked past, glanced at the information in Mag's hand, and paused in her steps. No. Those are just common men. A good man like me is a family man, Mag said righteously. After that, he threw the 2 pieces of paper with the information on the brothels into the bin. It's making money. There's no discrimination, Irina said with a smile. It's mainly because these 2 are subpar. Mag shook his head. Oh, do you know of a better place? In heaven and on earth, Mag glanced at Irina, whose gaze looked increasingly dangerous, and said, there's no place better than home. A man's fuel station should be a warm family. I have to make a trip to Chaos City to settle the affairs of the Night Elves. You can go back with the children tomorrow. Irina did not continue the nonsense with Mag. All right. Be careful on the way. Mag nodded. He knew that there was a lot that Irina had to handle on the Night Elves' side. After Irina left with her magic, Mag picked up the 2 papers he threw into the bin, and placed them at the bottom of the pile. To create a holistic entertainment commercial street, it was important to have a holistic ecosystem. With taverns as the core, the other aspects could not be missed out. However, Mag was not in a rush. There was an increase in customers coming over to take a look at the shops these few days. There was no fret that he could not get the shops rented out. The first thing he had to consider was who to choose. This opera troupe is rather interesting. It seems they are quite broke. I wonder how they fare. Mag looked at the application form of the Black Cat Opera House within the pile. They wanted the shop at the corner to make it into a theatre, but their offer was very low. However, interestingly, there was a line written in the application form in small handwriting, saying, "This is all that we have, please." There also was a small black cat stamp. This offer was completely unattractive to anyone. On top of that, an opera house would have limited attraction to men compared to brothels. However, Mag was rather curious about this opera troupe. One had to know that operas were considered a new form of entertainment even in Rodu, and there were barely any opera troupes around. Mag went to one with his family once. The ticket cost 50 copper coins, but there was barely anything to watch. It was horrible screeching and dancing with no beauty, and more than half of the customers left halfway through the performance. However, this Black Cat opera troupe described themselves as a rather impressive opera troupe, but was lacking a fixed performance venue, and thus they were in this difficult situation. In that case, I want to see if you are worth this shop. Mag pulled out that piece of paper, and kept the other information below the counter. After that, he went to Amy and Annie, and said, "Do you want to watch the Black Cat opera perform?" Amy's eyes lit up as she asked curiously, "Is it Caesar?" Meow Ugly Duckling was rather interested upon hearing the name. Caesar was Camilla's cat. Mag shook his head with a smile, and said, "No, it's an opera troupe." Amy was rather confused, and asked, "In that case, do I have to bring my blankie along? The big sisters in the opera troupe could sing me to sleep." Mag glanced at Amy. The opera actors would probably want to beat her up if they heard that. "I think we can bring 3 beds, Mag said with a smile. After packing up briefly, Mag brought the 2 little ones out. "Did I frighten you guys?" There was a white sign on the cracked wooden door with delicate black charcoal words "Black Cat Opera House" and a little cat drawn next to them. In fact, they had just passed by in their horse-drawn carriage earlier. It was just that Mag couldn't link the dilapidated yard in front of him with an opera house. Even the opera house where they went to watch opera for 50 copper coins per person looked proper. Amy got closer to the cracked door, looked in, and whispered, "It can't be here, right?" There seems to be no one here, either. There are actually many people here. Mag smiled. Although there was no one selling tickets at the door, there were actually more than 10 odd people in the yard now. If they were all from the opera house, then it could be considered as a small opera troupe. Then, are we still going to watch the show? They don't seem to be performing yet. Amy asked. This was also why Mag was in dilemma. It took them so long to find this place, of course they would feel indignant if they returned without watching the show. However, looking at their environment, Mag highly suspected that these people were into scamming rather than into opera. I'm very sorry, Maestro Pascal. Our Black Cat Opera has encountered some problems right now, but we still intend to continue performing opera, and have no intention to join your Maca opera. Please go back. Just as Mag prepared to leave, a gentle voice spoke up at the door. Maca opera? Why does this name sound a little familiar? Mag raised his eyebrows. Is it that opera troupe that makes one sleepy with its songs? Amy asked. Oh, yes. It's that one. Mag nodded. He was sleeping so soundly previously that he even didn't remember that opera troupe's name. Listening to their conversation, did the maestro of that opera troupe that sang sleepy songs come here to buy over the Black Cat Opera? This had proven from another angle that this Black Cat Opera had certain potential. Maestro Vicky, I know you're a sentimental person, but both you and I know very well about the Black Cat Opera's current situation. Even survival is a problem for you now, let alone talking about the opera house and stage. The Black Cat Opera will collapse if this continues. As long as you sign this contract, the Black Cat Opera and the Maca Opera will merge, and will be one family in the future. I have already found a sponsor, and he's willing to fork out money and build a big opera house for us. This is a rare opportunity. The middle-aged man tried his best to talk her into it. There was silence there for a while. Suddenly, an arrogant and annoyed voice said, "You greasy fatty! How many times do I need to tell you before you understand me? How dare you call your flying monkeys an opera troupe? Don't think you can call it a singing opera when it's just standing on the stage and yelling a few songs. You guys are the ones who damaged the name of the opera. Get out of here right now. Otherwise, I'm going to give it to you. I think you need to be educated." There was a series of rod-whacking sounds along with some painful shouts. That rotting door was knocked open, and a fatty with blood on his face stumbled out. He mumbled something before he stumbled away. Meanwhile, a petite maiden in a black Lolita dress stood at the door with her hands on her waist. Her green hair was all over the place, and she looked like a crazy little lion. Mag and his daughters stared at her with shock at the door. The rotted wooden swung in the cold wind before falling to the ground. And the green hair of that maiden at the door slowly fell down. Her angry red eyes slowly turned clear and bright, and her presence diminished instantly. Sigh, 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 that lady looked anguished as that middle-aged fatty disappeared at the end of the alley. Then, her gaze landed on the three people at the door. She seemed to suddenly realize something as she blushed awkwardly and smiled at them. In a gentle voice, she said, "I'm sorry. Did I frighten you guys?" She was a cute and sweet big sister with her gentle tone, sweet voice, and natural demeanor. Okay. Although she was less than 1.5 meter tall, she was still super cute. They simply couldn't connect her with that lady maestro who taught that 1.9 meter tall middle-aged fatty a lesson to defend her dreams and career. Is this the so-called acting skill? I'm a fan. Mag couldn't help but be impressed by the maiden in front of him. The grumpy queen had seamlessly transformed into a gentle lady. This benefit. The ordinary men could never understand that. We're here to watch the opera. Mag pointed to the signboard that fell to the ground. Oh! Vicky was shocked. She quickly picked up the signboard from underneath the door, and swept the dust on it away lovingly. Only then did she regain her wits, and said to Mag, "You say, you're here to watch the opera?" "Yes." Mag looked at Vicky, who was hugging the signboard like a baby in her arms, and nodded with a smile. "We didn't come to the wrong place, right?" "Of course. This is the Black Cat Opera." Vicky quickly nodded, and a smile blossomed on her face, but looking at the door lying on the floor, she awkwardly said, "It was an accident earlier, but our performance will never disappoint you." "I certainly hope so." Mag nodded and followed Vicky into the dilapidated farmyard. The yard was deserted but very clean. There was a little stage set up with wooden planks in the middle of the yard, which looked very miserable. In front of the stage, there were a few old and broken chairs, and signs of mending could be seen on them. "And this should be the so-called Black Cat Open Air Theatre. Please come in, the opera will start soon." Vicky welcomed the three of them with a slight blush. They were the first batch of customers who didn't leave as soon as they walked in. A few young heads popped out from the house at the side. They looked at the father and daughter trio with surprise and excitement, as though they were the opera singers. "Go and do your things. You don't have to take care of us." Mag flicked a glance at the chair's leg that was bundled up with cloth with a worried expression. Amy had already taken out her own folding chair. With it being a consumable, she had prepared a few more folding chairs smartly like her mother. Hence, Mag and Annie were sitting safely on the folding chairs that she brought along. Vicky had an embarrassed expression, but she was also very excited. At least the customers were sitting down, which was a good sign. "Please give us a moment." Vicky quickly strode to the actors' resting room. "This maestro doesn't seem very clever. Shouldn't she collect the tickets first?" Mag looked at Vicky's back with a frown. "It's great. The opportunity for our Black Cat opera to become famous is here." The actors in the opera troupe crowded around Vicky excitedly as soon as she stepped in. They had received cold treatment that they had never experienced before in this period of time. Their enthusiasm had almost all been eliminated by the cold wind and loneliness outside of this house. "All right, everyone. Let's prepare to go on stage. We don't get a chance like this every day. If this performance is successful, perhaps this customer will bring us more customers in the future." There was an ill-concealed excitement on Vicky's face too. "Maestro, did you collect their tickets?" Right then, an old voice spoke up from a corner. The smile on everyone's face froze, and they all looked at Vicky. Vicky's expression froze as well, and she looked awkward. With a blush, she shook her head and said, "Not yet." Sigh. All of them sighed immediately. It looked like this wasn't the first time it happened. A troupe member looked at Vicky with exasperation, and said, "Maestro, we haven't had any income for 2 weeks. If this goes on, we might all die of hunger." Growling someone's tummy made a series of rumbling sounds. Everyone had ill-concealed worry on their faces. "All right. Let's shut up." Vicky suddenly changed her demeanor. Her red eyes swept over all of them like a king surveying his subject as she said in a low voice, "A good opera singer will never worry about food. As long as you do your best in your performance, everyone will have to pay for the tickets, unless he doesn't want to step out of this yard." Everyone fell silent instantly, and began to make preparations to go on stage. Mag and the two little ones had already taken out the small blankets to cover themselves in the cold yard. The small blankets were finally used, but they didn't expect they would be used to ward off the cold instead of sleeping. An open-air theatre that they needed to bring their own chairs and blanket, this was even a first for Mag, an amateur opera lover. The Black Cat opera singers were taken aback when they came out gradually and saw the 3 people sitting on the chairs, covered in blankets with a fire in front of them. It was a little weird and a little cute. Especially the 2 little girls who were covered with a small blanket with just their heads showing. They looked pretty and exquisite. Their adorable looks were so cute. Ahem. Vicky coughed once to remind her troupe members to behave more professionally. They had seen no audience for a long time, so the audience became unusual to them. Obviously, this looked too unprofessional. All the actors retracted their gaze, and went onto the stage one by one. They began their performance. Mag threw a quick glance. This was a small opera troupe that only had 16 people. There were 3 musicians and opera singers of both sexes, both young and old. They all looked a little emancipated. It seemed like being an artist was indeed not easy. This opera was named Miss Black Cat. The opera troupe was called Black Cat Opera, and their opera was named Miss Black Cat. This was obviously very clever for a little opera troupe that had just started. If the opera became famous, then their opera troupe would be famous too. The performance began. Without an orchestra as backup, the ambience was obviously lacking. However, what was beyond Mag's expectation was that this opera troupe's performance was actually quite nice. Their emaciated looks didn't affect their solid singing power and acting. The rich singing even went beyond this deserted stage's limitations. Miss Black Cat was a story about how a young mistress from a big family broke out from the constraints of the world, and was finally rewarded with love and career. She kept fighting and struggling, finally gaining her freedom. It was a very conventional and simple story, but the opera singer's performance made it full of tension, and triggered the audience's emotions. What made Mag the most impressed was the actor playing Miss Black Cat, Vicky. This petite maestro had a shocking soprano. Her control over her voice was even more impressive. She was several notches above the other actors. He finally understood why Vicky could be the maestro. She had great singing and acting skills, and was an all-rounder. No one was her equal. The 2 little ones were also enjoying the show. Although they were covered with blankets and toasting themselves at the fire, they didn't feel sleepy at all. "Father, what is Miss Black Cat singing? Why can't I understand her?" Amy asked curiously. Right now, Vicky was singing a low and sad song in a language that Mag had never heard before. Mag listened to it carefully for a while. The system didn't change it into effective words. He simply felt that the tune was a little familiar. "I don't know. Perhaps it's a dialect from somewhere." Mag shook his head. Although they didn't understand the language, the emotions could be passed on through the singing. This Miss Black Cat opera was way beyond Mag's expectation, with Vicky and the other actors all out acting. Just taking Vicky's professionalism as an example, it was already far above the main actors of the few operas that Mag had seen before in his previous life. She was definitely a professional. However, the opera in this world was just in its cradle stage. How could there be such an excellent maestro? Perhaps she was a legendary genius? Or, perhaps she was a transmigrator just like him? Mag's curiosity was successfully piqued. The performance ended. Mag, Amy, and Annie stood up to clap, showing their admiration for this opera. Annie even wiped the corner of her eyes. It was obvious that this little one liked this story very much. "Thank you." Vicky led all the actors to take a bow. It was obvious that they were in an excellent mood. Receiving the audience's applause and praises was an opera singer's honor. It was also the motivation for their perseverance. Annie turned to look at Mag, and gestured a question. "Can I draw this story down? We'll have to ask Miss Black Cat's opinion. This is her story, after all." Mag smilingly looked at Vicky, who was walking towards them. "I can help you ask her later." Annie nodded. "The performance is excellent, and your singing is impressive and unforgettable," Mag said to Vicky with a smile. It wasn't an exaggeration. It was exactly how Mag felt after watching this show. Of course. This is the best opera performance on the Norland continent. Vicky tilted her head up slightly like a proud little lion. There was a hint of arrogance in her red eyes. "It's your honor to be able to listen to such a performance." Mag simply stared at her. Although she wasn't wrong, it was still rather inappropriate to say such things to the few customers that she had, right? Vicky lowered her head, and the red glow in her eyes faded away. She looked up at Mag, who had a weird expression, went pale, waved her hands, and awkwardly said, this. I'm sorry. She must have said something impolite to you, right? I meant, thank you for watching. The tickets, forget about it then. Who was she? Initially, he thought Vicky was using her acting skills to protect herself, but looking at it now, it didn't seem like that. Such change might not be her acting skills, but another soul that existed in her body. This was interesting now. Combined with his previous guess, perhaps a modern singer had to take over the whole body when she transmigrated. She was now sharing a body with the original host, so it caused her current schizophrenia-like condition? It was a very interesting guess. Mag looked at Vicky with interest. Shaking his head, he smilingly said, "Of course we have to pay for our tickets after watching such a marvelous show." The eyes of Vicky lit up, and she looked up at Mag. She couldn't help showing her expectant gaze. Their opera troupe was almost bankrupt now. The only valuable thing in the opera troupe was the clothes on her now. However, this was her only clothes. It was her daily wear and also her costume for Miss Black Cat. If she sold this set of clothes, it would be equivalent to declaring the Black Cat Opera disbanding. However, if this audience member could pay them for the ticket, even if it was just 10 copper coins, they could buy some rice to cook porridge and hang on for another few days. The troupe members were also looking over here. All of them were disappointed when they heard the maestro was going to waive the tickets charge, but now they were excited again. This audience member looks rather loaded. He should at least give us 10 copper coins, right? Wow! Looked at his two little precious girls. How nicely and adorably dressed they are. He should at least give us 20 copper coins. I say, you guys are really too unambitious. They are the first batch of customers that finished watching our performance in these 2 weeks. He's not leaving this yard without paying us 30 copper coins. I hope I get to eat a few more grains of rice in tonight's porridge. The opera singers were chatting softly at the side. They were all thinking about how much Mag was going to pay them for the tickets. Mag wasn't in a hurry to pay. Instead, he looked at Annie, and said, "My child loves your opera. She asks if she can draw the Miss Black Cat story into a picture book." A picture book? Vicky considered it seriously for a while before saying to Mag, "Is she just drawing it for fun? Or she intends to publish it?" Ayo. The question is very professional. Mag was getting increasingly certain that this maiden wasn't an ordinary person. Her copyright awareness had far exceeded the majority of the people in this era. "We'll consider publishing it." Mag nodded. Vicky said to Mag, "I created the story of Miss Black Cat. If this little sister wants to draw it into a picture book and publish it, I'll need to look at her work first. After making sure that it's up to my expectations, we can talk about the issue of splitting the profits then." Vicky still explained in a gentle tone. "You might not understand, but the story of Miss Black Cat is very important to me. It took me a lot of effort. I hope you can understand." "I can understand." Mag nodded. "This is our tickets money. The opera is marvelous. I hope I can see your performance again." Mag took out 3 silver coins, and gave them to Vicky along with a piece of paper. "This is my address. Such a marvelous performance shouldn't be confined to such a place. If you are interested, you can come and look for me. I can provide a better environment for you guys." This, Vicky was surprised when she saw the 3 silver coins in her hands, and then she became hesitant when she heard Mag's words. "Don't worry. I simply like your performance, and you have the right to decide." Mag took Annie and Amy's hands, and nodded to the actors standing at the side before walking towards the door. "Oh, yes. Perhaps Annie will have completed the story of Miss Black Cat when you come. You may check if it's up to your expectations," Mag said to Vicky before leaving as he turned around. Vicky held those 3 silver coins and the piece of paper as she stood there motionlessly for a long time. The troupe members only started to crowd around Vicky after a long time. They looked at her, trying to speak up, yet couldn't. "What are we standing here for? These are 3 silver coins." Vicky regained her wits, and arrogantly said to the actors, "Tonight, let's eat meat." Eat meat. Everyone cheered instantly. They had been starving for this period of time. Their eyes lit up when they heard the word meat. "Honest chap, take this money and go buy 1.5 kilograms of meat, 5 kilograms of rice, and some vegetables." Vicky gave 1 silver coin to one honest-looking middle-aged man. "Alrighty." The man kept the money preciously and quickly left. Vicky went into her room, and opened up that piece of paper. There was only an address on it, Romo Street, Saipan Tavern. She was very familiar with this address. It had still been very deserted 1 month ago, and she had thought of settling there once too. However, the money in her pocket didn't agree with her decision. She went there again 2 days ago. She was surprised to find it full of people. She only found out after asking a few people that Romo Street was going to take off after 2 taverns won the gold awards on the liquor tasting event. She was regretting it a little now. If only her money bag had been a little fuller, their Black Cat Opera would have been on the shortcut to success now. However, she still wrote an application and filled in a rental sum that she couldn't afford as a last-ditch effort. And now, this audience member was going to give her a chance. Although she wasn't sure what place he had prepared to let them perform and what other terms there were, it would definitely be better than this dilapidated yard. Furthermore, if she remembered correctly, this tavern was one of the taverns that won the gold award. That man was loaded. "What do you think about it?" Vicky suddenly asked. "Isn't it just a discussion?" "I'll go if you're afraid," Vicky answered her own question. "I'm afraid you'll start to fight with him." "Why are you afraid when I'm not? You always push me out whenever you can't win a fight." "I'm really afraid." After getting out of the yard, Amy looked up at Mag expectantly, and asked, "Father, that opera is so nice. Are we coming again?" If little Amy likes it, we will come again." Mag nodded with a smile. It was rare for the little one to be so interested in something other than food. "Then, can I draw Miss Black Cat?" Annie asked with sign language. "If you want to, Annie, you totally can, but we can't publish and sell it before we receive Maestro Vicky's authorization." Mag nodded smilingly. He was prepared to impart some knowledge about intellectual property rights to the little ones. The Black Cat Opera's performance had far exceeded his expectations, so he intended to give them a chance and let them perform in a more professional location. And this would become a very important link in the Romo Street's ecosystem, perhaps even above Saipan Tavern and Titan Tavern. Arts, still deserved to be looked forward to. The system gave Mag a language pack that included all languages in the Norland continent so that he could understand the languages of all races. However, he could not understand what Vicky sang. Of course, it was normal that there were some languages he did not understand. For example, Yordles. After hearing that, one could only exclaim, F***ck. However, Vicky was not yodeling. The tone was deep and filled with sorrow. It had to be very meaningful. The language is not within the system's language bank. There is no way of ascertaining and translating. This is not a commonly used language by the races on the Norland continent, the system replied very quickly. Mag said softly, "Do you mean she is a transmigrator or from some hidden race? Or maybe she's like XI, she came from underground. 50% hidden race, 30% transmigrator, 10% from the underground world, 10% an unknown existence." The system gave an analysis report. 50% transmigrator, 10% hidden race, 30% underground world, 10% unknown existence. This is my conjecture. Based on her awareness of copyright, Mag thought that she was not a hidden race like Noya. She should be someone who had lived in a place where copyright and patent protection were highly valued. The Elder Things had high technological standards. Therefore, there also had to be an equal standard for copyright and protections. If she was a transmigrator, the problem of language and the opera singing standard surpassing that of Norland continents could be explained. Of course, she should not be from Earth. This lady is not simple. Mag thought about which shop he wanted to convert into an opera house. Based on the current situation of the Black Cat Opera, they would not even have enough money to feed themselves, much less afford the rent of 50,000 copper coins. Mag had decided, with the idea of getting a high return of interest, that if Vicky came to look for him, he would build them an opera house, but at the same time ask for a portion of the opera troupe's profits in return. Judging from Vicky's abilities and the holistic standard of Black Cat Opera, Mag was very confident that this opera troupe would be able to make it big and profit. Mr. Bobby, I regret to inform you that the Black Cat Opera still rejected our cooperation. On top of that, that darn woman even scratched me. Pascal held his face, which was filled with bloody scratch marks, angrily. The young man standing in front shook his head, and said, I am sorry for what you've encountered, but Miss Vicky is a very gentle lady. You should not malign her like that. Pascal was full of grievance. You have not seen her hysterical. She is a lioness. Black Cat Opera took out a bag of silver coins, and passed it to Pascal as he said calmly, this is your pay. Deliver a part of it to Black Cat Opera. They are in a very difficult situation right now, but many of them are very excellent performers. You know it, such chances are hard to come by. Pascal received the bag of money, opened it, and his eyes lit up. He immediately changed his attitude and nodded respectfully as he said smilingly, I do. I will make another trip to Black Cat Opera again to make most of them part of the Maca Opera. Remember, you can make Black Cat Opera land in a sticky situation, but you must not harm Miss Vicky. She is mine, Bobby said with a warning look. I understand, I understand. Pascal kept the money, and watched Bobby leave in his carriage before muttering to himself, what's so good about that woman? She has neither figure nor good temperament. Why is he spending so much money on her willingly? Mag taught Mela how to make drunkard peanuts in the afternoon. This was a relatively simple dish. However, it still posed a challenge to Mela. Mag taught as he demonstrated how the dish was made step by step. Lastly, he used his golden finger to add the final touch, dispelling all her queries and confusion. After spending the entire afternoon on it, Mela finally managed to master the first steps of making the drunkard peanuts. Now, it is the time to become familiar with the steps. After that, take time to practice at home to quickly master the dish. Mag grabbed a handful of slightly charred peanuts, and threw one into his mouth. The fire was still not controlled well, and the taste was a little off. Hum. Mela nodded hard with excitement. This was the first dish she had learned from her master. Although it was still not perfect, she felt that she had already learned a lot. But master, are these really peanuts made by drunkards? Mela could not help but raise the question that she had been holding inside the entire afternoon. Her master did not seem like a drunkard, either. Why did he give it such a strange name? No, this is peanuts that would make one turn into a drunkard. Mag shook his head with a smile. Because it goes very well with alcohol. Oh. I see. Mela understood. It was very different from what she thought. Right, Mela. We'll be going out tomorrow, and might be gone for several days. If a lady in a black dress comes looking for me, help me pass this to her, and bring her to shop 101. Mag passed Mela a cowhide bag. What is her name? Mela received the bag. She's called Vicky. All right, I got it. I will keep a lookout. Mela nodded seriously. Mag did not make Mela stay for dinner. After all, there was still Eofi back there waiting for her to feed. Amy carried Ugly Duckling in her arms, looked up at Mag, and asked, if we're going back tomorrow, should we bring the big sisters some presents? Yes. If little Amy hadn't brought it up, I would have forgotten about it. Mag nodded with a smile. They had already been out for 2 weeks. It was only right to bring some gifts back for the ladies. In the evening, the 4 new employees came in advance. Mag arranged for them to do work. Jones, who had the experience of being a cashier, had the most important job of manning the cash register. The other 3 ladies were in charge of ordering, serving, and cleaning up. With the addition of new employees, Mag's workload was lightened significantly. However, after the end of the day, Jones looked at the exhausted colleagues, and could not help but suggest to Mag, "Boss, perhaps we need more colleagues." Saipan Tavern's business was way better than what they had expected, and it was not like what they experienced in their previous taverns. It was really too difficult for 4 servers to handle such a tavern. Even if they were very experienced, they would still make mistakes due to the high volume. "Yes. I will continue to look out for some potential candidates." Mag nodded. He had also realized the problem. He had still not adjusted from Mamie restaurant mode, thinking that one employee could complete many jobs. This was really too much to ask of a normal server. Chapter 2135 Only You Can Do It. The little one was obsessed with creating recently. She wouldn't sleep until it was 11 p.m. or 12 a.m. "Why did you guys come back overnight?" Irina came out from the room, and looked at Mag with surprise. "I can't sleep well when you are not around," Mag answered with a smile. "Ha!" Irina rolled her eyes at him. They wouldn't really not sleep well tonight since he was here. "Annie, go to bed after drawing this page," Mag reminded Annie, and settled the 2 children in. "Go and shower first. You smell of smoke and liquor." Irina raised her hand and stopped Mag's approaching body. "Together." No, Mag lay on the bed and stretched out lazily after a hot shower and exercise. Speaking of it, Mamie restaurant was indeed the most comfortable. Mag lowered his head toward Irina, who was snuggling at his chest, and asked, "Do the night elves have any problems?" "And nothing," Irina was panting slightly. "I've talked to Michael. I intend to take part in tomorrow's meeting in the name of the night elves. I'm afraid that witch Helena is going to act up." Mag chuckled. He could already imagine Helena's expression. "This isn't something that she can decide." "At least I don't represent the elven race," Irina said nonchalantly. "However, since we're going to form an alliance and have allied forces, we'll have to choose a leader to command the troops. What do you think about that?" Irina looked up at Mag with a serious expression. Mag thought seriously for a while before shaking his head, and said, "Looking at it now, there is no one that can impress all the races. Even the dragons can't choose a leader among themselves, let alone the allied forces. If this is the case, I'm afraid even if we form the allied forces, we're still in a state of disunity," Irina said worriedly. Mag also nodded gravely. They were facing Thulhu and a fearless and obedient army of the dead. If the allied forces were in a state of disunity, then they would have no chance to win this war at all. There was already a clash of benefits among the races, and some of them even had feuds that couldn't be resolved. It would be good enough if they didn't stab one another in the back. At such a moment, if there were no strict rules that could unify all the races and make them fight together and a strong commander that all the races were willing to take instructions from, this war would have been lost right from the beginning. "I think that person can only be you." Irina looked at Mag with bright eyes. "Me? Yes. There's no one more suitable than you right now." Irina nodded. "Be it battling Thulhu with lightning outside Chaos City, or the free man identity after breaking away from the Roth Empire, or your strong individual power and charm, you are the best candidate. Am I really as good as you said?" Mag rubbed his chin and considered it seriously. "This is also what Michael said to me today. This war will be an absolute disaster if the allied forces are in a state of disunity." Irina looked into Mag's eyes and nodded with conviction. "Now, the Norland continent needs you." Mag was really deep in thought right now. It wasn't that he was afraid, he was simply worried that he couldn't lead in a war of this scale. Furthermore, it even involved such a complicated situation. and the experience Alex left to him was only restricted to small-scale battles with the orcs at the borders. However, looking at Irina's encouraging and expectant gaze and the current tight situation, he really couldn't say no, either. They indeed had no choice. "All right, I will stand out." Mag nodded. Irina smiled and her red lips pressed onto his lips again. Again. Earlier next morning, Mag got Amy to go to the dormitory to ask Mia and the ladies over for breakfast. Meanwhile, he had prepared a big table for breakfast. Yabimiya carried Amy in, and stared at Mag, who was still busy in the kitchen, with a surprised expression, saying, "Boss, you guys are finally back." Angela followed her in, and excitedly said, "The familiar taste. Life with delicious breakfast. Is it going to begin right now?" "Boss, Annie." Jane greeted them with a smile. "Boss, my rum is ready. Do you want to try it?" Hannah came in with a bottle of rum, and shook the bottle at Mag. "Let's not drink so early in the morning." Mag came out of the kitchen with a row of steamers. He took the bottle of rum from Hannah, and put it on a counter at the side. He had no doubts about Hannah's brewing techniques. Since it was a bottle of rum that she deemed ready to be sold, it had to be good rum. It seemed like the alcoholic beverage market was going to welcome a new savage now. A savage who could supply in bulk while maintaining its high quality. Yabimiya looked at the soup dumplings in the steamers, and curiously asked, "What's this? It's round and looks so cute. Is this the new breakfast that you created, boss?" Everyone's gaze was attracted by the steamers too. "This is the soup dumpling, father's latest creation for breakfast. It's super delicious." Amy climbed onto her designated high chair. She took a plate and reached out to pick a juicy soup dumpling. "Let me teach you how to eat it." Mag placed a steamer in front of each of them. There were only 3 soup dumplings in each steamer. They were the focus of this breakfast. All of them only felt relief after they watched Amy pinch that soup dumpling wobbly and put it onto her plate. Then, they saw her bite a small opening at the upper corner and sip the soup before eating the dumpling together as a whole. The whole seemingly ritualistic process befuddled all of them. Amy licked the grease on her lips, and asked everyone, "Did you guys get it?" "Oh well, let me demonstrate to you again." Before they could answer her, the little one picked up the second soup dumpling, and continued to teach seriously. All of them quickly followed Amy's example with a smile. They picked up a soup dumpling gingerly, and put it onto their respective plates before eating it in small bites while it was still hot. Yabimiya finished a soup dumpling, and couldn't help heaping praises on it. "This soup dumpling is simply too delicious. We can drink its soup and eat the meat and skin. It's simply perfect. But, the soup is so hot. I feel I have lost the sensation on my tongue." Hannah poked her tongue out sadly. Angela finished a soup dumpling gracefully before reminding Hannah, "This is the tongue of a millionaire brewer. You have got to treasure it. I can help you cool it down." Amy extended her hand, and a cold flame rose up gradually. "I'm all right now." Hannah quickly retracted her tongue, and shook her head in rejection. Chapter 2136 Alex is here. "Boss, you have no idea how much the customers miss you. There are dozens of people asking when the restaurant is going to reopen at the ice cream shop every day," Yabimiya said with aggrievement. "Yes, there are even perverts waiting for us below our dormitory." Hannah nodded, and sadly said, "I thought they were lusting after our beauty, but I didn't expect they just wanted to eat your dishes. Isn't that too much?" Mag listened to the ladies talk about the funny incidents with the customers during this period of time. He was rather surprised that Mamie Restaurant had that special place in the customers' hearts. He thought a restaurant was just a place to eat. They could always go to the next one if this one was closed. He didn't expect so many people to stay and wait at his restaurant. It wasn't just the regulars. Recently, there have been many customers who came from afar too. I heard they came because they had read a magazine called Perfect Food. They could only leave in disappointment when they saw that the restaurant was closed. Mia said to Mag, "I read that magazine too. You wrote that article, boss. There are even people who come straight to the restaurant." Mag was even more shocked. They even came just because of a magazine. He had indeed underestimated the Chowhound's determination. Yabimiya nodded, and said, "Yes. So, you're really not going to open the restaurant in these 2 days? Even opening for 2 days can bring some consolation to the customers." "Forget it. They had just gotten used to life without me. It will only make them feel worse if they were to lose something again after getting it back." Mag shook his head with a smile. Mainly, it was because he had to go save the world. If this world ended, those Chowhounds wouldn't even get a chance to eat anymore. Mag and everyone chatted for a while. He flicked a glance at the clock, and came up with an excuse to go out. The racial meeting was going to start soon. Of course, Mag couldn't miss it. Chaos City. The representatives of the various races began to take their seats at the round table in the meeting hall. The organizer of this meeting, the Lord of Chaos City, Michael, sat in the central position as the host of this meeting. The Giant Dragons representatives were Lewis and Douglas. The Golden Dragons and the Frost Dragons had buried the hatchet, and gained many supporters in the Giant Dragon race lately, so they gained the right to represent the Giant Dragon race at the Dragon Tribes meeting for the Elves. It was Helena and Sally. As the new princess of the Elven race, Sally became more and more dependable and steady. Furthermore, her power had exceeded 8th tier. She could be considered as one of the outstanding ones in the younger generations. The Orcs representative was also very eye-catching. Connie had become the only queen of the Twilight Forest. This was something that had never happened in the past hundreds of years in the Orc race. Furthermore, the hairless monk was sitting next to her as her #1 bald bodyguard. No one dared to underestimate this master and disciple duo. The king of the dwarves came personally. He was chatting softly with the king of the goblins. Their topic was related to cannons. The demons' delegation was still a little messy as before. The top 10 demon tribes had all sent a representative. They obviously hadn't reached a consensus yet. Meanwhile, the most conspicuous of them was the new chief of the vampires, Camilla. No one had expected the vampires to change their chief at such a time, even though it was a peaceful handover. The new chief of the forest trolls sat in his seat demurely. After being taught a lesson by Mag, he had no temper at all. As for Lantist, High Priest Dexter and the king were both present. It was obvious how much importance they had placed on this meeting. As the power of the Lantistine slowly became obvious, they became the overlord of the sea. They could rival the disunited demons, and people couldn't ignore them at all. The Night Elves. "Irina has arrived," someone loudly reported outside. Everyone's gaze moved to the door. Irina walked in gradually. She looked around and eventually sat down at the position that had her name written on it. Helena's expression went cold, and she turned to look at Michael. "City Lord Michael, I think this is inappropriate, right? Irina and the Night Elves support a peaceful Norland continent, and are willing to pitch in to stop the army of the dead. It is perfectly appropriate for her to take part in this meeting," Michael answered normally. Irina smiled at Helena. Her gaze landed on Sally briefly before she looked away. "Humph," Helena snorted coldly. However, the elves were getting weak, and today wasn't an occasion that she could simply walk away. She could only show her displeasure and remain quiet. Dracula looked at Irina with shock and murmured softly, "Seems like this girl has become even more powerful. She seemed different from before. She became even more powerful." Camilla couldn't help sitting up even straighter to make herself look even more graceful. However, after flicking a glance at Irina, she still felt she was far inferior to that woman in front of her. Big sister Irina is still as beautiful and powerful as usual. Connie looked at Irina with admiration. Even though she was already the queen of the Twilight Forest, she knew she had only learned bits from Irina. The hall was quiet, and there were still 2 vacant seats at Michael's right. They belonged to the Roth Empire's delegation. Meanwhile, there was also an empty seat next to Irina. It belonged to that man. The Roth Empire's delegation is here. Andrei and Marshal Dominic strode into the hall. Andrei's gaze swept over all the representatives present, and halted on the position next to Irina before he and Dominic walked to the seats next to Michael under the staff members' guidance. "Welcome, King Andrei," Michael said with a smile. "Thank you for waiting, ladies and gentlemen." Andrei nodded slightly, his demeanor was no longer as proud as before. No one could expect that the Norland continent's situation could change so drastically in less than 1 month. Josh was working for the Devil, and the army of the dead had converged in the snow plain in the extreme north under the Devil's lead, preparing to move southwards. The arrogant Roth Empire could only shudder in front of the army of the dead and the Devil. The peace accord that had been rejected reappeared on the negotiation table, and it was still the same batch of people sitting here. However, all of them knew the result this time round. The negotiation was no longer the objective. How to resolve the army of the dead that threatened all the races and the Norland continent was what all of them cared about. "Alex is here." A man in a black light armor walked in from the door. Chapter 2137 Is it Mamie Restaurant's special performance today? Alex. The man who had done his utmost to stem a raging tide by resealing the Devil that was about to break through the seal and stopped a catastrophe. He was also the most powerful knight, or perhaps, the most powerful existence on the Norland continent in the recent 10 years. All the races quickly regathered at Chaos City because of that photo stone he brought back from the extreme north. It was hard to imagine what would have happened if he hadn't discovered the existence of the Devil and the army of the dead, as well as what a tragic situation all the unprepared Norland continent's races would be in when the army of the dead marched southwards. Furthermore, Alex could also be the only one who really broke through the 10th tier upper limit in the recent 1000 years with his power. The tribulation lightning that looked just like an apocalypse had indeed shocked all of them. Meanwhile, guesses about his power became the hottest topic in all races recently. With any doubts, Alex had become an existence that could influence the situation on the Norland continent. Be it Irina, who had always followed him around, or Lantist, who was obviously loyal to him, people simply couldn't ignore them. Mag sat next to Irina and nodded slightly. He didn't deliberately arrive last to flex. It was because he had chatted with the ladies for a while longer earlier. Moreover, he was punctual. It was these people who came too early. Mag swept his gaze over the people present. The various representatives were almost the same as the previous meeting, just that only Connie's voice was left for the Orcs. The Moon Nation's Great Formation Master, Jonas, was present too. He was taking part in this meeting with Babla as the Moon Nation's representative. The Moon Nation's spell formation masters had been crucial in sealing the half of Thulhu beyond Chaos City previously. This was also the first time that Mag asked Michael to seek Moon Nation's assistance strongly. Thulhu couldn't be killed. Mag knew that very well. Even the Elder Things couldn't do it, otherwise they wouldn't have just resealed it back then. They would have simply killed it. And the people the best at setting spell formations were undoubtedly the spell formation masters under Jonas' command. Jonas was also looking at Mag now. Their eyes met, and they nodded at each other. "Master, I know big sister Irina. Alex is Irina's man, so it means that I know Alex too," Babla said softly. Jonas threw an exasperated and amused glance at her. Michael stood up, and loudly said, "Since everyone is here, let's start the peace meeting now. All of you have the new peace treaty in your hands now. The content is the same as the previous edition and the one we signed 100 years ago. However, in the Boundless Sea Realm, beyond the territorial waters of the Demon Islands, there will be an area that belongs to the Lantistines." The staff members placed a thick stack of documents into the hands of the participants sitting at the round table. The representatives didn't rush to make their positions known, instead, they all began to read through the fine print. This concerned the interests of all the races, so they had to be serious about it. The chief of the flaming demons angrily said, "The boundless sea realm has already been our private plot. Why should we let them occupy a stretch of territorial waters? Furthermore, it's very close to our demon islands. Perhaps they might target our territory one day. I object to it." "That's right. It's just a race that popped up from nowhere and tried to occupy our sea," the Abyss Demon chimed in, stating his displeasure on this clause too. Camilla looked at the two of them, and said in a mocking tone, "Although this is a race that popped up from nowhere, they do have more than 10 10th tier powerhouses, and they are a powerful race that has Alex's support. Moreover, they can survive in the ocean with a blessed racial superiority. If the army of the dead march southwards, Lantist, who is able to survive underwater, is definitely going to be the race that would outlast all of us. Now, they are joining us to resist the army of the dead willingly, and all they want is a stretch of territorial waters that they are living in right now. Do you think you have the right to object? Or can you go underwater to chase them away?" "You." The two chiefs were at a loss for words. They didn't know how to refute her. The flaming demon's chief flared his nostrils, and said, "The vampires have indeed chosen a lousy chief. Maynard was at least more courageous than you." "No. Maynard was replaced by me because he was too cowardly." Dracula, who was slumping in his chair, sat up gradually, and swept his gaze over the top 10 demon tribes representatives. "This is the attitude of the vampires. We prefer a friendly neighbor to a powerful opponent. Moreover, the other party might not even be interested in your puny islands." All the demons looked at one another. After a brief discussion, they reached a consensus. They agreed to acknowledge Lantist's existence. This was a reluctant decision. Just as Camilla said, no matter how unhappy they were, they couldn't go fight it out with the Lantistines in the sea. Moreover, the other party had Alex's support right now. They might not be able to defeat them, either. Mag looked at Camilla with upturned lips. This woman rarely displayed her smart side. The demons had reached a consensus, so it saved them some trouble. As for the fight for territory, the Orcs had lost their will to fight after they changed their chief. The Roth Empire was the closest to the threat of the army of the dead. They were still waiting for the other races to negotiate their terms and send troops to help them out. They had already lost their right to negotiate. There were a few demon tribes that were ready to make trouble, but since they were having an internal conflict, they couldn't do it even if they wanted to. Therefore, this treaty had basically received all the tribes' approval, which was expected. Michael nodded, and was about to ask his staff to prepare the signing ceremony. Right at that moment, Connie suddenly said, "Wait a minute. Chief Connie, what would you like to say?" Michael asked. "We Orcs agree to sign this treaty, but before that, I have a condition for King Andre of the Roth Empire to agree to," Connie said to Andre. Everyone looked at Connie. The Orcs and the Roth Empire had just had a tragic war. A feud like this couldn't be erased so easily. Andre's expression turned solemn too. He sat up properly, and said to Connie, "Please go ahead." Connie stood up gradually, and said to Andre, "Even though the investigations showed that it was Josh who initiated the Roth Empire's war on the Orcs after he sold his soul to the devil, this war has caused huge damage to us Orcs. Dozens of tribes were massacred and annihilated in this war, and hundreds of thousands of Orcs perished, leaving ruins everywhere in the Twilight Forest. Before we sign the new treaty, we Orcs need the Roth Empire to address this matter formally. We have to resolve the damage and losses inflicted on the Orcs by this war first. Otherwise, we Orcs will never sign on to the treaty, and we will use our own methods to seek revenge for our dead tribesmen. Is it Mamie Restaurant's special performance today?" Mag couldn't help thinking about it when he looked at Connie with a cocked eyebrow. If the Roth Empire didn't respond right now to the war that invaded the Twilight Forest and make an appropriate compensation, perhaps another war between the Roth Empire and the Orcs would happen before the invasion of the Army of the Dead. This seemingly weak maiden was the first to challenge the powerful Roth Empire after she took the position of the Orcs chieftain. Of course, a woman who could kill Oster and take over the Og tribe shouldn't be underestimated. All of them looked at Andrei. As the king of the Roth Empire, he could make any decision for the Roth Empire. Meanwhile, everyone was also reminded of another matter. If the Orcs were under Oster's control instead of Connie's, then the Orcs would have missed today's meeting and invaded the Roth Empire suddenly, while the meeting was in progress as revenge. In comparison, Connie was already considered a very calm and reserved ruler. Mag looked at Connie with appreciation. She had made great progress in a short period of time and should be treated differently. This lass's ability at controlling the situation was not bad. She could already pull her own weight. Andrei also stood up and nodded at Connie. I express my deepest regret and apology to the innocent Orcs who died in vain. This matter was caused by the devil. My son, Josh, has lost his soul and many of my courtiers and their families were massacred too. It was obvious that the devil is very vicious and dangerous. Of course, our Roth Empire is undeniably responsible too. I'm willing to apologize to the Orcs on behalf of the Roth Empire and make some compensation to the Orcs who died. However, I hope the Orcs can battle the devil and the army of the dead together with the Roth Empire to avenge your people who had died innocently and protect those who are still alive. She is simply not his match. Mag was rather amazed. Andrei's words were really smooth at pushing away his responsibility. Anyway, this matter had nothing to do with the Roth Empire. It was all the devil's fault. Because of the devil, he had lost a son, some of his courtiers and a batch of brave soldiers. As a victim, he was even willing to give the other victim some compensation. What was more important was, the two victims should work together to deal with the devil and seek revenge. See, the party that started the war became the poor victim in a few words. Moreover, he even sounded so reasonable, making people unable to refute him. In comparison, Connie's words seemed negligible and even a little unreasonable. Connie was slightly taken aback and a hint of anger could be seen on her face. If they were talking about negotiation techniques and saying respectable words, she naturally wasn't this sly old fox's match. She even had to practice repeatedly in the past 2 days in order to say her earlier words so steadily. Now, Andrei had steered the topic away and shirked his responsibility with just a few words. Obviously, he didn't want to take on too much responsibility. However, to the Orcs, this was unacceptable. Although she was the Orcs' chieftain now, to really convince the Orcs, she had to seek justice for her people even if they couldn't start a war with the Roth Empire. The devil is our common enemy, but the butchers who have massacred hundreds of thousands of Orcs have not repented even now, Connie said in a low voice. We only have 3 requests. 1. Hand the commanding officers of those 3 northwestern troops that invaded the forest to us. 2. Compensate the Orcs with 1 million copper coins per Orc killed. 3. Promise to hand Josh over to us for punishment when we catch him. Andrei nodded and gravely said, one can accede to your second and third requests. Even a compensation of 1 million copper coins per person is hardly enough to appease the Orcs who had died innocently, and I will hand over Josh, who has lost his humanity and committed all these sins under the devil's manipulation, to you Orcs too. However, the soldiers only acted upon orders. This matter is solely Josh's responsibility and not on the soldiers. The Roth Empire will amass all our troops to go up north to stop the army of the dead. The Northwestern Legion will be sent onto the battlefield as the vanguard to fight for the Norland continent. Therefore, I cannot accede to your request to give you those soldiers. I hope you can understand that. Connie looked at Andrei in silence. The meeting hall became silent too. Both parties had made their stands, but they both wanted to insist on the other party conceding to their requests. Mag frowned. It wasn't hard to understand why Andrei wanted to protect the Northwestern Legion soldiers. Just as he said, the soldiers acted upon their orders and an obedient army was proof of strict military discipline. Moreover, fighting all the way in to reach the Og tribe was the proof of the Northwestern Legion's intrepidness. It would definitely demoralize the soldiers and the troops if Andrei handed them over to the Orcs. Even though Josh was under the Devil's control, the one who gave the orders was the second prince, and he even did it in the king's name. Hence, Andrei would never back down on this matter. As for the Orcs, the accumulated anger needed a vent for release. If Connie couldn't resolve the internal conflict, her position as the chieftain wouldn't be stable. It was an intractable stalemate. But, this was all within his expectations. However, they didn't have much time left. Xi had already sent him the information regarding the army of the dead and Thulhu assembling. The army of the dead's number was rising rapidly and they might soon travel southwards. If the Orcs and the Roth Empire continued to argue over the war compensation, causing a delay in the signing of the treaty, the army of the dead could already have marched southwards while they were still in the meeting. Mag stood up and gravely said to Connie and Andrei, "We'll have to use many lives to stop the army of the dead from moving southwards, and this number will far exceed the number of people who died in all conflicts and wars among the races in the past 100 years. We don't have much time left, so I hope both parties can put down your feud for the moment and work together to face the huge impending crisis. I know you all have seen the photo stone, but you may not know how powerful that devil is before you face it personally. But you guys have previously seen that devil that was sealed beyond Chaos City. The devil that has escaped from the seal is even stronger, at least I have no chance at all to defeat it. I can't even hold it back to buy time for the formation masters. As for the army of the dead that are in the millions, they can't sense pain and are beings that have no life. They're not afraid of death, they don't tire and they don't need replenishments. We have to stop them at the edge of the ice plain before they move southwards, or else we will pay a tragic price. The Orcs who died aren't simply a number." Connie looked at Mag. Mag nodded and said, "I know, but if we don't react fast, more families are going to lose their husbands, children, or even every member in their families." Michael gave a slight nod. He was also thinking of how to mediate the conflict between both parties, so that the peace treaty could be signed quickly. Mag's statement was more convincing than his. "I agree with what Alex has said. The current issue at hand is resolving the devil and the army of the dead. If the Norland continent falls, there would be no meaning to solving the loss of a city or a town. Chief Connie, I will arrange for the courtiers to quickly pay for the war losses. Please give those soldiers a chance to prove their worth," Andrei said to Connie sincerely. Connie subconsciously looked towards Rex. Alex's interception left her at a loss. That may be so, but there are scoundrels within the Northwestern Army that have to be held accountable for their crimes, aren't I right, Marshal? Mag spoke again. This time, he was looking at Dominic, who was sitting beside Andrei. A knight's principle is to not harm the innocent, women and children. That is also the basis of being human. No matter which official gave such an inhumane order, as a knight, one should still abide by their beliefs and principles. Those leaders who forced the soldiers to kill and imprison the innocent, burn and raid territories should be handed over to, for the innocent, shouldn't they? What rights do they have to die on the battlefield like a soldier? Are they fit for such an honor? Andrei's lips moved. He glanced at Dominic and chose to remain silent. Seeing that Andrei did not speak, Dominic could only stand, and after a moment of silence, he nodded and said, "They are indeed unfit to be called knights, and neither are they fit to die on the battlefield as a soldier." Mag nodded and took his seat. Dominic looked at Andrei and said, "Your Majesty, please allow me to clear all the scoundrels within the army. They are not fit to stay within the army, nor are they fit to be called a knight." Andrei said in a low tone, "All right. After you find them, notify the entire army that these people are to be handed over to the Orcs." "Chief Connie, what do you think?" Andrei asked Connie. "If you can keep your promise, I will agree to it." Connie nodded. She looked much more relaxed. Alex still left the Orcs some dignity. This was the result that Connie wanted. "Not a bad outcome," Irina said to Mag telepathically. Mag smiled calmly. Actually, the result would have been the same. Mag just gave the Roth Empire a legitimate reason to clear out the scoundrels from the army. In the Northwestern Army, most of them would be Shan's men. Look, this is killing two birds with one stone. The conflict between the Orcs and the Roth Empire had been mediated and the signing of the peace treaty went on smoothly. Connie and Andre signed a ceasefire and both parties confirmed the details that had been discussed. The Roth Empire would hand all the war criminals over to the Orcs in addition to a lump sum as a repayment for the war. At the same time, they also promised to hand Josh over to the Orcs if he could be caught. Following that, the other races debated over the details of the peace treaty. After some minor adjustments to some of the clauses, the final version was set. The various representatives wrote their signatures and the new peace treaty was officially signed. The century-long peace will begin once again. Everyone seated here is incredible, Michael said to the various representatives that were present. Chaos City had been working hard for this for decades. To think that the peace treaty would be signed again under such a situation. After all the miscellaneous processes were completed, the meeting was finally over, at around dusk. As a witness, Mag was like an unimportant bystander. He took time out to return home to cook for the children. After that, he had a few rounds of drinks with Irina before returning to the meeting. The peace treaty was finally signed and so next up would naturally be discussing how to build the Allied forces to go against the Army of the Dead. According to the latest news, the number of the Army of the Dead is now in the millions, consisting of horrifying ancient giant corpses that are on par with 10th tier powerhouses. There are also powerhouses exceeding the 10th tier, like Rankster and the Devil, that are stronger than before. Mag looked at everyone and said solemnly, "We need to build an allied force strong enough to stop the Army of the Dead at the northern ice plains." Millions. The various representatives were shocked to hear that. This far exceeded everyone's expectations. Is the source of the news reliable? Lewis looked at Mag. "I took a trip to the north last night. Ancient corpses were gathering on the ice plains, reaching more than 1 million in number. They could march down south any time." Mag took out a photo stone and played the images that XI sent him yesterday. The ancient corpses had covered almost the entire area of ice, their number stretching out with no end. They gathered in a clear direction, as though something was beckoning them. The expressions of the various representatives turned grave. Alex would not have to lie about something like that. Besides, this image was very convincing. What kind of concept was a million-man army? In the Norland continent, only the Roth Empire, after a century of reproduction, managed to reach a million-man army. The other races would never be able to make a million-man army unless all their people joined in. Besides, the manpower needed to run the logistics for a million-man troop would way surpass 1 million people. This was not something any tribe could do easily. However, their opponent was the Dead Souls. They were ancient corpses that were tens of thousands of years old. They were controlled by the devil and did not need any logistical support. They were all aligned in their actions and were not afraid of death. How do they face this? The representatives who had the intention of just adding some men in for numbers were at a loss. They even thought of dropping out. Andre frowned. The various representatives all had their own thoughts on this. If they refused to send their best troops out to support, the Roth Empire would be in danger. "The Roth Empire will send out all our elite troops, a total of 600,000 soldiers and magic casters to the northern region to fight the Army of the Dead. At the same time, we will take on the majority of the logistical support for the Allied forces," Andre said loudly. "This concerns the Norland continent as a whole. I hope everyone will take a step forward." Mag nodded. 600,000 elite troops on top of the Allied forces' logistical support. Andre was bringing out almost the whole of the Roth Empire's manpower, showing his sincerity. However, he had no choice either. The Roth Empire was first in line. If the Roth Empire did not show their sincerity, the other races would not send their elites to join the Allied forces. Michael said loudly, Chaos City is willing to send out 30,000 of our most elite garrison to join the Allied forces to fight the army of the dead and also take on the responsibility of logistical support as well. Men. Lewis said in a solemn voice, the giant dragons will send out 8,000 giant dragons to fully support this battle. 8,000 giant dragons. Mag's eyes lit up. That was solid air attack capability. Giant dragons had long-range attack capabilities and were mostly able to deal attacks to a wide area. This would form resistance to the army of the dead in the air. The giant dragons had the smallest number in terms of population among the races in the Norland continent. 8,000 giant dragons were basically the core strength of the giant dragons. It seemed that the giant dragons were still very bothered about the fact that the devil escaped from Dragon Island. Immediately, the various races all made their stand. Lantist would mobilize 10,000 troops to join the Allied forces. Only Mag knew that this was already all of Lantist's military force. They went all out. The goblins sent out 5,000 soldiers and another 10,000 logistical support elite troops, who would be responsible for deploying logistics. The goblins were known for their logistics and planning abilities. After all, they still managed to be organized despite living in the complex underground caverns. On top of that, they were able to produce the most mined products in the entire continent, showing that they do have some talent in that. The trolls sent out 10,000 soldiers and 20,000 logistical support, who would be in charge of moving the logistics to the plains. The dwarves sent out 5,000 soldiers and took on the responsibility of weapon maintenance, site building, and other work. They were very excellent craftsmen. The orcs would send out 20,000 soldiers to join the Allied forces. As a strong race that could take on the Roth Empire, the orcs also had a large population. However, the orcs had requested that the Roth Empire would have to take on the logistical support for the orcs, and Andre agreed immediately. Now that the various races had made their stand, only the elves and demons were left. Everyone turned to look at Helena and the demon representatives. The various demons looked around at the elves. It was indeed difficult to make a decision. How many people from the night elves? Helena was not in a rush to make her stand. Instead, she chose to throw the ball to Irina's court. Irina said calmly, I have already sent out a voluntary battle recruitment. As of now, there are 3,500 qualified elves joining the Chaos City's army. Out of them, 1,000 are soldiers and 2,500 of them will be in charge of medical and logistical support. Very well. You are very similar to the Elf Queen in this matter. Helena nodded. After that, she declared, the elves will send out 20,000 soldiers and 10,000 medical support. Mag looked at Helena in surprise. The situation within Wind Forest right now was not looking good, and he thought that Helena would leave most of their manpower in the Wind Forest in case there was a change in situation, but she had deployed almost all her elite forces. After Helena made her stand, the various representatives all looked at the representatives from the top 10 demon tribes. As there wasn't a tribe that was strong enough to conquer the rest, there was also much internal debate on whether to join the Allied forces. Now, the demons had no unified voice and no one could represent them to make a stand. Since the situation has come to this, just do what you can. See how many people you can deploy before you come and how many your subsidiary tribes can deploy. All of you should know very clearly the number you have. Dracula placed his wine glass down and said with a smile, the vampires can send out 1,000 people. 1,000 vampires, based on their current population, was a lot. Since the various races are all doing this to protect the Norland continent, we should not dilly-dally. If we can't stop them now, we might be in a sorrier state later on. The chief of the spatial demons smacked the table and said, the spatial demons in our subsidiary tribe can send out 10,000 soldiers. The vampires and spatial demons had already made their stand, so the other demon tribes did not waste any more time. Other than the flaming demons and abyss demons who had used up most of their resources due to the internal conflict previously, the other demon tribes were rather sincere. In the end, the demon islands sent out 100,000 soldiers, the third largest number after the Roth Empire and the Orcs. Fantastic! This way, the races of the Norland continent will also have a 1,000,000-man troop to fight with the army of the dead. We will not be at a disadvantage. Andrei cheered. The soldiers deployed by the various races far exceeded Andrei's expectations. This scale and magnitude represented the current strongest fighting forces of the Norland continent. A century ago, the races were at war, but now a century later, the races were fighting together against the devil. The various representatives all smiled. They were frightened when they heard Mag say that there were 1,000,000 of soldiers in the army of the dead. Now that the various races had sent out their soldiers in support to form a formidable army like never before, they all felt the courage to fight on. Michael stood up and said, "The Allied forces are formed, but this large troop has come from the various races. In order to fight effectively on the battlefield, we will have to decide tonight on how we should command the army and who should command the army. If we are not in unity, we will just be thrashed by our opponent." After Michael said that, the various representatives all fell silent. After that, they started a fervent discussion. Command? The soldiers of the Abyss demons only listen to me. I do not want them to listen to the commands of any Tom, Dick, or Harry and die just like that, the chief of the Abyss demons scoffed. The flaming tribe would not listen to the commands of others too. Aren't they just dead souls? A fireball would burn out a lot of them. Do we still need commands? I'm afraid it would be difficult to choose a commander. If you choose someone that is not impartial, he would definitely protect his own people and put the other races in the front line, Helena said. War is not a game. This is a 1,000,000-man elite troops battle and something no one has ever experienced. Who could take on such an important role? Lewis asked with a frown. The alliance that was just formed was still weak. Each race still had their own interest at heart. It was obviously not realistic to hope to find a commander that everyone could agree with. The giant dragons were respected, but they did not gain the respect from fighting battles. They did not have a talent that could command a 1,000,000-man army. Besides, after confirming the commander, it would mean that the person in control had the power to deploy the manpower of the various races. The various representatives would naturally all have thoughts on that. Michael saw that everyone was arguing again, so he said loudly, "The various races have come together to form an alliance and a strong allied force. If we do not have a commander, it would be akin to being inefficient with our capabilities. There is no chance of us winning. I think we should vote for a commander that everyone thinks is capable, so that the allied forces can become more efficient and harder for the army of the dead to deal with. That way, we can successfully attack the devil and army of the dead." Back then, the elves lost almost the entire forest, but Helena and the elf queen managed to drive the orcs and demons out of the forest with their outstanding commanding abilities and strong personal charisma. On top of that, when the 100,000 cavalry from the Roth Empire attacked the Twilight Forest and split up to tear the entire place apart, it was as though nothing could stop them, and that proved the importance of good combat cooperation and commanding capabilities. The orcs were not a weak race, but the tribes that only fought for themselves could not form a strong enough combat power and would only be thrashed. I agree with that. The current situation concerns the security of the Norland continent. If we only care about the personal interest of each race, we would only end up in complete defeat, Douglas said with a nod. We agree as well. There is no point engaging in a battle that is without order, the Dwarf King said loudly. We do not have any issues with it either. Let's take a vote and choose someone to be the commander, the Goblin Chief said. Candidates? Helena asked. Everyone turned to look at Michael. Michael looked around and said, "Everybody here are highly respected individuals and are also some of the top powerhouses of the Norland continent. Everyone is a potential candidate. This concerns the survival of the Norland continent. I am very touched that everyone is willing to play a part. The role of the commander is very important, and I wish that any capable person could step up and take on this responsibility to volunteer as a candidate. Every race here will have one vote each. The candidate with the most votes would become everyone's commander." The rules were simple. Everyone present was eligible to take part and could volunteer to be a candidate. After that, each race would vote for the ultimate commander. The candidate with the most votes would become the commander. Everyone was agreeable to this way of choosing the commander. This was naturally not the time for a martial arts competition-styled election. In that case, I will not hold back. We, the Abyss Demons, are experienced with battles, and I have commanded hundreds of battles, be it the racial war back then or the other big and small battles throughout the years. I would naturally be the best fit as the commander, the Abyss Demon Chief said confidently with a smile as he stood up. Haven't you lost enough back then in the Wind Forest? Helena scoffed. You can't even defeat the flaming demons. Counting on you to fight the devil is akin to getting the elites of the various races to fill up the hole in the ice, Irina mocked him as well. The two of them naturally could not stand how the Abyss Demon Chief boasted about the crimes the Abyss Demons committed in the Wind Forest back then. You! The both of you! The Abyss Demon Chief's face flushed red, but he was stumped for words and could only sit back down angrily. The Flaming Demon Chief, who was sitting at the side, wanted to boast as well but did not expect himself to be implicated too. He clenched his fists and forced himself back into his seat. That also made the other passionate demon chiefs, who were about to stand up, calm down. They were unable to win over even the tribes of their race, much less the other races in this situation. Uncle, why don't you give it a try? Camilla muttered. Dracula sighed with a shake of his head. Although I know that I am very charismatic, I am someone who hasn't commanded even 1,000 men battle. I really can't hold the fort for 1,000,000 men war. Camilla pressed her lips together. It was just a casual suggestion, you might not even win the demons' vote. I would believe that too. Dracula nodded honestly. If the demons could unite, they could actually be even stronger than the orcs. It was a pity they were divided. There was silence for a moment. Louis stood up and said while looking around, "Count me as a candidate. The giant dragons are capable of managing the big picture, and we, the golden dragons, have also taken part in various battles back then during the racial war." Louis was known to be a powerhouse for a long time, and it was indeed convincing given the giant dragon's capabilities. André nodded at Dominic. Dominic stood up and said, "I am Dominic, the Roth Empire's marshal. I've commanded the Empire's 1,000,000-men cavalry, and I have decades of experience, be it in the arrangement of battle tactics or troop management. This is a difficult battle, and coordination between the races is very important. I think I can be a good commander." Everyone could not help but take a second glance at Dominic. It was as he said. Dominic was the only one who had experience managing 1,000,000-man cavalry. Although Dominic was not the one commanding the Northwestern Legion's battle against the Orcs, it was said that Dominic was the one who came up with the attack plan. The Northwestern Legion merely acted according to plan, and they almost took over the Twilight Forest. The humans were indeed better than other races in terms of the use of battle tactics. Otherwise, it would not be easy for the humans to survive in the Norland continent among the other strong races, given their weak physique and strength. I've led the Elves to an epic comeback during the racial war back then, chasing the orcs and demons out of the Wind Forest, and have created many battle miracles. I think I would be able to lead this war, Helena said calmly as she stood up. Everyone was shocked that Helena would take part in the candidacy. However, what she said was the truth. The Elves did make a comeback in the racial war. The orcs and demons were two strong races, but they lost badly. Helena, who was the high priestess of the Elves, played an important role in the battle. There were more people taking part, and after the representatives present volunteered themselves, everyone turned to look at Alex. "Will he take part?" Connie asked softly. "Maybe. Actually, there's no better person than him," Rex said as he looked at Mag. Dexter was also looking at Mag expectantly. Mag stood up and said calmly, "I'll take part." It was simple and clear. "I don't think anyone would know the devil and army of the dead, as well as how to deal with them, better than me," Mag said. It was a straightforward reason that no one could refute. Mag knew that he had already won when he saw the expressions of the various representatives. Chapter 2142 Alex. Who was he? He was the man who attracted the ordeal lightning to suppress the devil and buy time to reseal the devil just as everyone was about to give up. He was the whistleblower of the Army of the Dead's incident. The promoter of world peace. And, undoubtedly the #1 powerhouse on the Norland continent right now. Now he has taken part in the election. A smile appeared on Dexter's face. His vote would naturally be given to Lord Alex. Irina was also looking at Mag with a smile on her face. He was indeed her man. The way he stood out was simply too suave. There should be no suspense now. Camilla looked at Mag and shrugged. Unless I take part, otherwise there is no suspense. Dracula nodded. Connie flicked a glance at Rex. You are the chief, you should make the decision, Rex said with a smile. Connie nodded. She had already made a decision inwardly. After Mag entered the election, no one else stood up to take part in it. Is there anyone else who wants to take part in the election? Michael asked. No one spoke up. All right, all the races will now vote on the few candidates who stood up earlier, and the one who receives the most votes will become the supreme commander of the Allied forces. Michael declared loudly, does any one of you have any other suggestions? Dracula put his hand up and seriously asked, I have a question. We demons can't reach a consensus, so how do we cast our vote? After a brief pondering, Michael said, why don't you 10 tribes vote internally first? The one who receives the most votes will get the vote from the demons. The chief of the Abyss demons patted his chest and said, vote for me if you are my brother. Alex. The Flaming Demons chief was the first to state his vote. Alex. Dracula stated his vote on behalf of the vampires. Alex. Finally, Alex had defeated the Abyss Demons chief with 9:1 votes in the demons' internal voting and received the very first vote. None of them are dependable, the Abyss Demons chief had a sullen face. He was really humiliated. The other races chose to vote anonymously. The staff members passed the voting slips down and all the representatives wrote their choices on the slip before passing it up and letting Michael announce and count the votes right on the spot. Chaos City, the Giant Dragons, the Roth Empire, the Orcs, the Elves, the Goblins, the Dwarves, Lantist, and the Trolls. There were a total of 9 votes, and in addition to the Demons' vote, whoever received the most votes would become the Allied Forces' Supreme Commander. All the representatives stared at the crystal box in front of Michael. It was transparent, so there was no chance to tamper with it. Of course, Michael wouldn't try such tricks in front of a bunch of 10th-tier powerhouses. Now, all the votes are here. I will conduct the counting right now. Michael opened up his hands to show everyone present before he put them into the ballot box. He took out the first vote and opened it in front of everyone. Dominic. Michael read out the name on the voting slip. All the representatives looked solemn as they quietly waited for the results. Michael took out the second vote. Helena. Michael read out the name on the second vote. Dominic. The third vote was still Dominic. Many people's gazes landed on Dominic. It seemed like there were still people who trusted this experienced old marshal. Mag also flicked a glance at Dominic. Technically speaking, Dominic was the best candidate for the Allied Forces' Supreme Commander. However, this battle was different from any other battles that the Roth Empire had with the other races before. Mag had to be the Supreme Commander in order to control the situation. Thulhu couldn't be killed. They could only reseal it. Fighting the Army of the Dead wasn't their objective. The threat of the Army of the Dead would be eliminated as soon as Thulhu was resealed. Of course, given Thulhu's craftiness and unparalleled power, the Allied forces definitely would have to pay a great price to stop the Army of the Dead's invasion. Andre's eyes lit up too. It naturally would be the best if Dominic could become the Allied forces' chief commander. Alex. Michael took out the fourth vote and read out the name on it. Dominic and Alex had both received OVO votes, so the results were still unknown right now. All the representatives had a thoughtful look. They began to consider what the situation would be if one of these two people became the Allied forces chief commander. Michael took out the fifth vote. Alex. 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 Votes after votes with Alex's name on them eventually killed all the doubts. Alex received 7 votes and became the Allied forces chief commander with an absolute majority. This was a world that idolized might after all. Furthermore, compared to Dominic, who was loyal to the Roth Empire, Alex, who had left the Roth Empire, was indeed a safer choice. Besides, just as Alex had said, no one knew the devil better than him in this world. He was the only man who could fight with the devil. And, also the only being who could repeatedly retreat safely from the devil. Alex also came from the military. He was the chief commander of the Northwestern Legion back then and was deemed to be the next Roth Empire's marshal. Alex receives 7 votes, so he will be the Allied forces supreme commander. Michael declared loudly. It's indeed him. Camilla looked at Mag with amazement. He has received almost everybody's trust. He's simply too formidable. Connie was also looking at Mag with adoration. All the various representatives congratulated Mag too. Mag stood up and said to all of them, "Thank you for putting your trust in me. I hope we can trust one another and cooperate to eliminate the devil and the army of the dead. Relax. I'll make sure the giant dragons follow your orders," Lewis chuckled and said. Dexter got up and respectfully said, "Lantist is loyal to you." Connie also stood up and respectfully said, "The Orcs will obey all your instructions. The Roth Empire respects all the race's choices and will follow your command." Andre stated his stance too. The concentration of power was smoother than what Mag expected. Mag said to all of them with a grave expression, "This is destined to be a very difficult battle. We need immense courage and wisdom, so I hope Marshal Dominic can be my assistant. He has a wealth of command experience and a great military simulation ability. He's a great military strategist." Everyone's gaze landed on Dominic. Dominic stood up and cupped one fist in his other hand as he said to Mag, "I'll definitely do my best." Chapter 2143 I know the way. In this area, Dominic, who had been a chief commander for decades, was obviously much better than Mag, so Mag easily threw that responsibility to him. Meanwhile, he met with the Moon Nation's formation master, Jonas, and Babla alone. This war's crux was how to reseal Fulhu again, so the seal spell formation became of utmost importance. There was no damaged spell formation for them to repair this time, and they could even pinpoint Fulhu's location, but they had no way to make it stay put in one place for them to seal it up. When faced with absolute power, many plans looked feeble. Jonas looked at the 3 spots Mag drew on the map and pondered for a while before seriously saying, "I need to go there personally to ascertain which spot is the best to set up the spell formation. According to the attack timing that you deduced, we can only finish setting up one spell formation." "All right. I'll get Michael to send someone to bring you there." Mag nodded. Babla looked out distractedly a few times. Finally, she couldn't stay put. She stood up and said before she slipped away, "Ha, I'm sleepy. Master, you guys take your time to chit-chat. I still have something else to attend to, so I won't keep you company here. The princess might have some matters to attend to." Jonas explained embarrassedly. "The youngsters are all like this." Mag smiled. He knew why Babla was in such a hurry. The alliance was already formed, but there were still many issues to straighten out. For example, the various territories that the Allied forces needed to march through and the logistics replenishment etc. Even though Mag was the chief commander, he didn't intend to do everything himself, so Irina and he left early. "Master, I'll leave these matters to you guys. I'll go back to sleep first and have a meal," Connie yawned and said to Rex before leaving right away. "Uncle, you go back by yourself later. I have something else to do. I'll go first." Camilla informed Dracula and then slipped away too. Hey! Wait a sec, Dracula watched Camilla disappear at the door and raised his eyebrows. This girl! Didn't I choose you to be the chief to do all these things? Camilla came out from the city lord's castle and smilingly said to Connie, who was sitting on the stone lion in front of the door and swinging her legs, "Tisk tisk tisk. Our little Connie has become the queen of the Twilight Forest." Babla also looked at the two of them smilingly and said, "Oh ho, isn't it so? I thought I would become the queen of the Moon Nation first, but looking at it, both of you are faster than me." Connie looked at the sky with her head tilted back at a 45-degree angle and sighed gently. "Actually, I only wanted to be an assassin at first." "All right, stop acting." Camilla reached out to pat Connie's head and laughingly said, "We haven't had dinner yet. Our most important mission now is to fill our stomachs." Growling. Connie's stomach grumbled in coordination with Camilla's statement. "Yes. I'm starving. Let's return to the restaurant now." Connie patted her stomach and nodded in agreement before walking forward quickly. "This restaurant is this way." Babla quickly reached out to stop her and then pulled her towards the opposite direction as she lamented, "Only you can be a queen like this. Let me go." "I know the way," Connie tried to struggle. "However, with your sense of direction, how did you manage to kill Oster?" Although he had lost an arm, he was still a 10th tier powerhouse after all, Camilla asked Connie curiously. There had been many versions of rumors on how Connie killed Oster, because it signified the passing of power in the Twilight Forest and Connie taking over from Oster. However, many more people suspected that Oster wasn't killed by Connie, but by Rex. But Rex gave the credit to Connie, which allowed her to take over the position firmly. Even Camilla and the ladies who knew Connie well, were quite curious about it. After all, Connie was someone who could even lose her way when she was making a delivery. It sounded rather fantastical to listen to her being an assassin and kill a 10th tier powerhouse 2 tiers above her. Just getting into the Og tribe and finding Oster's bed chamber were already a huge challenge to her. Perhaps, it could even be described as an impossible task. "Wow! You girls mistrust my power to this extent." Connie looked at the two of them with aggrievement and hurt. "It's not that we don't trust you." Babla shook her head and gravely said, "It's simply too hard to believe it." Camilla nodded with a smile too. "All right. Although I didn't find his room by myself, he was indeed killed by me. I used 3 strikes while he was sleeping." Connie extended 3 fingers and waved them. "Aren't I formidable? It was really you who killed him." Babla stared at Connie with shock. Even though she was an 8th tier spatial magic caster, she had never imagined someone could go 2 tiers above and kill a 10th tier powerhouse. "Please call me an assassin." Connie looked up to reveal her proud chin. "You're formidable." Camilla gave her a thumbs up. She had already believed Connie. Crossing over tiers in a formal battle was rarely successful. However, it was another matter if it was an assassination. Even a 10th tier powerhouse couldn't stay vigilant and defensive at all times. And an assassin was meant to find the moment where one was most relaxed, launch a full-powered attack and end the battle. For example, even a normal human being with a dagger could kill a magic caster when he was sleeping. Connie, whose master was the hairless monk, had mastered many assassination techniques. It was reasonable for her to assassinate Oster in his sleep and succeed. "Cool." Babla's eyes lit up and she looked at Connie expectantly. "Why don't you teach me how to be an assassin too?" Connie looked at Babla and shook her head. "No, you can't do it." "Why can't I do it?" Babla puffed out her chest and said with indignation, "I'm the famous genius from the Moon Nation. But you're a magic caster. You'll expose yourself as soon as you draw out your magic wand. You'll be killed before you can finish chanting a set of spells, so how can you be an assassin?" Connie patted her flat chest and suggested, "Why don't you learn melee magic from little Amy first?" "No." Babla pushed away Connie's hand and shook her head in rejection. It wasn't that she didn't want to learn. She was simply too embarrassed to ask. Connie continued speaking, think about it. If you mastered melee magic, together with your spatial magic, you will definitely be the best among the assassins. You can appear anywhere without any signs and you'll also have the ability to strike in an instant. Chapter 2144 Let's begin our feast. Sally got up and left the boisterous meeting hall. Then, she left the city lord's castle. Walking in the cold winter wind, there were no pedestrians on the street and the long streets looked rather desolated. A familiar yet strange city. That day, she gathered all her courage to leave the forest and ran all the way to this city. She had wanted to travel around the continent initially, but she stopped at a small restaurant. Thinking back about it now, that time seemed to be the only time she was living for herself in her whole life. I wonder, if they are all right. Sally looked towards the south of the city with a hesitant look on her face. After a long time, she still walked towards the south. Mag returned to the restaurant in advance and prepared all sorts of ingredients. Soon after, the ladies arrived one by one. Uncle Mag. Anna ran into the restaurant and leaped straight into Mag's arms. Mag carried the little one and turned around twice. Looking at Anna, who had grown taller, he asked with a smile, "Did you have a good time, little Anna?" Anna nodded obediently. "I simply missed your cooking, little Amy and big sister Annie." Then have some more to eat later. Little Amy and the rest should be back soon too. Mag swiped the little one's nose with a smile. She was still as understanding as ever. "Boss." Shirley nodded at Mag with a beautiful smile on her face. "Please take a seat first. We'll start eating once they are back." Mag nodded with a smile. He was rather surprised at Shirley's aura. She had successfully advanced to the 9th tier in a short period of 2 weeks. Shirley nodded and sat down at the side. Anna followed after Mag to help him out. She was a qualified little chef. "Princess, is boss really back? Is little Amy back too?" Fira's voice sounded at the door as she followed Irina in. "Your Highness." Shirley got up and bowed to Irina. Irina also looked at Shirley with a surprised gaze as she said, "You have advanced." "I did it last night with a stroke of luck." Shirley nodded. "Wow! Are you a 9th tier magic caster now, Shirley? That's formidable." Firas, who followed Irina in, looked at Shirley with amazement. Among the younger generations of the elves, Shirley was the most powerful apart from the princess. Even Sally, who had become the elven princess, was only an 8th tier magic caster now. "Compared to the princess, I'm still too weak," Shirley humbly said. "Boss, you guys are finally back." However, Firas' attention was already attracted by the food on the table and Mag, who was busy in the kitchen. She picked up her skirts and ran towards the kitchen. Looking at Firas, who was about to give him a hug, Mag flicked a glance at Irina, who had a mysterious smile on her face. Mag quickly picked up the pot at the side and said, "Be careful, the pot is hot." Firas quickly applied her brakes. She looked at Mag with a blush that was 30% excitement and 70% shyness. She didn't expect that she almost ran over to hug boss in an excess of enthusiasm. Mag drizzled the hot oil over the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers and casually asked, "Firas, have you been cooking recently?" The red chopped chili sizzled in the hot oil and infused soul into the fish head. A fresh aroma spread everywhere. Firas nodded and said, I've been responsible for improving the night elves' food recently. The canteen is supplying the eggplant with garlic sauce and mapo tofu every day now. They are everyone's favorite dishes. Furthermore, they get to eat piping hot congee with pork and century egg every morning too." Not bad. You brought the scrumptious dishes to more people. Well done." Mag looked at Firas with praise. This was why he taught Firas to cook back then. Firas' blush turned even redder, but she couldn't hide her smile no matter how hard she tried. There was nothing that made her happier than receiving Mr. Mag's praises. Anna put up her hand and said, I have been helping Big Sister Ferris out at the textile factory recently too, and I even taught them how to chop the ingredients. Then little Anna is awesome too, Mag nodded and said. Anna said with a smile, it's Uncle Mag who is awesome. I learned everything from Uncle Mag. Oh yes. Boss, is there anything I can help you with? Ferris asked Mag. She hadn't been to the restaurant for a long time. She would have come to help out early for the gathering tonight, if it wasn't for the fact that the princess had just told her that Boss was back. I'm fine. Just bringing this steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers out will do. The dishes are all done. We just need to wait for everyone to arrive. Mag shook his head with a smile. Mr. Mag, you're finally back. An excited voice spoke up as soon as Mag removed his apron and came out from the kitchen. A figure dashed over and then jumped onto Mag before he could react, and wrapped her legs around him. Oh, this darn softness, they seem to have grown bigger again? Judging from the familiar softness on his face and the faint fragrance, Mag also knew who the person was. It's not suitable for children to see. Babla, who had just walked in, reached out to cover Connie's eyes before staring at Gina's voluptuous figure enviously. I'm already an adult. Connie shrugged her head downwards, trying to see what was going on. Gina, don't stop. Mag quickly pulled Gina off him and made her stand properly at an arm's length before Irina exploded. Mr. Mag, I missed you guys. Gina looked at Mag with a blush. Happiness and excitement filled her face. Everything was fine with Gina. She was an innocent and simple girl, it was just that her way of expression was too direct. Oh well, a girl who grew up deep under the ocean was just so sweet and naive. Fortunately, she met an upright man like him. Otherwise, she would have long been taken advantage of. I missed you guys too. Mag nodded with a smile. His gaze did a quick sweep inconspicuously. They have indeed grown bigger. Then, he looked at Babla who had just come in. She was still as flat as ever. It seemed like, the moon's gravity was indeed a little insufficient. Why did they say children who ate seafood when they were growing had more proteins? Are we having grilled meat tonight? Babla's gaze was already attracted by the kebabs that were stacked up like tiny mountains at the side. There was a glow in her eyes. Why is she here too? Camilla came in and immediately became nervous when she saw Irina. She was with Alex today at the meeting, but why did she suddenly appear at Mamie restaurant? Perhaps, she came for the free food? We're back. Amy skipped in and then skipped into all the big sisters' arms one by one. She kissed them on the cheeks before declaring with satisfaction, let's begin our feast. Amy and Mia returned from the ice cream shop and everyone from the restaurant was now present. Everyone had been apart for quite some time, so they naturally did a lot of catching up. Connie, who had become the chieftain of the Orcs, became everyone's teasing target. After all, this little girl was soft and cute when she arrived at the restaurant. They didn't expect that not only did she become the Fok tribe's chief, she even became the chieftain of the Orcs now. Big sister Connie, if I just tell them your name, am I able to walk sideways like a crab and do anything I please in the Orc race in the future? Amy looked at Connie curiously and even imitated a crab by walking sideways. Could anyone stop little Amy from walking sideways even if you don't tell them my name? Connie asked with a smile instead. Everyone laughed too after hearing that. Speaking of this, little Amy was the real little genius. All right, let's sit and slowly chat as we eat, Mag said. He was the first to take a seat. Irina sat down next to him. Although she didn't interact with him, she acted just like the lady of the house. Amy climbed onto her high chair and the ladies all took their seats. The big round table was soon fully occupied. This was a boisterous scene that hadn't appeared in Mamie restaurant for a long time now. After all, the restaurant had been closed since Mag and his family left Chaos City for Rodu. With good food and drinks, everyone enjoyed their meals. No one talked about the events that happened at the City Lord's castle today. Is the restaurant going to reopen for business again? Camilla asked Mag. All the ladies quieted down and looked at Mag. The restaurant had been closed for 2 weeks. This was a long break that had never happened before. All the races would announce entering into the state of war soon. They would soon put in all their efforts to support the Allied forces to go north, but obviously, it wasn't suitable to bring children out for travels again. No. There are still 2 weeks before Amy's holidays end. I intend to reopen the restaurant after she starts school. Mag shook his head with a smile. Speaking of this, it was rather interesting that the employees of Mamie Restaurant were tightly entwined with the Norland continent's fate now. Be it Connie, who was going to lead the Orcs to the north, or Camilla, who had become the chief of the vampires, or Bablat, who was responsible for building the seal spell formation, they all played an important part. Bablat chewed on the kebab and mumbled, "Oh, I see. That's good. I want to apply for some time off too. However, it hasn't been peaceful out there recently. Boss, you'd better not bring little Amy and Annie out for travels now. It's not safe," Connie said to Mag seriously. Camilla nodded too. It really is so. Although Mag was despicable for watching her photo stone at night, this man was not bad apart from that. He was a great cook and got along well with everyone. Yabimiya put down her bowl and asked Connie with concern, "What happened?" "It's better for everyone to stay in Chaos City and not travel far now," Connie said. Yabimiya hesitantly asked, "Then, will Elizabeth be in danger?" Connie flicked a glance at Camilla unnaturally. Rankster's news had been brought up many times at the meeting today. Elizabeth was still not found yet. This was the information shared by the Frost Dragon's Great Elder, Douglas. He also hoped that all the races would help them find her. As colleagues and friends, they naturally cared about Elizabeth's safety. Yabimiya was closest to Elizabeth. She would be worried sick if she knew about Elizabeth's situation now. "She's a smart girl. She will be all right," Irina said. Yabimiya was visually more relaxed when she heard that. She smiled at Irina. "Thank you. It's rare that we can get together today. Everyone is beginning to move out of the restaurant, which is a small place. We don't know when we will get together again. Come, let's eat and drink to our heart's content." Mag raised his glass with a laugh. "Cheers." Everyone raised their glasses and clinked them laughingly. At the square, a figure stared at the brightly lit Mamie restaurant in a daze. Even though she couldn't see the figures in the restaurant clearly, nor could she hear their boisterous sounds, that warm lighting still made her feel warm on this cold winter night. A smile appeared at Sally's lips. Even though she couldn't go in, she could sense the energy just by looking at it from the outside. She turned around and prepared to leave. However, the restaurant's door opened. "Since you're here, why don't you come in for a drink?" A warm voice spoke up and Sally's footsteps halted. After a moment of hesitation, Sally turned around to look at the figure at the door. The warm smile was still as heartwarming as ever. That pair of clear eyes was irresistible. A smile blossomed like a flower on her cold face. So, there were still people waiting for her to come back. This feeling was great. "Aisha." Yabimiya walked to the door and her eyes lit up when she saw Sally standing outside. Then, she ran over, hugged her and happily said, "You're finally back." Sally felt slightly awkward about Yabimiya's enthusiasm, but her heart felt warm instantly when she was hugged by her big sister Aisha. Amy also ran out with a chicken thigh in her hands. She ran to Sally with open arms, but looking at Sally, who was wearing a long white dress, she looked at her oily hands and stopped herself in time. "For you." A freshly cooked beggar's chicken thigh. Sally looked at the chicken thigh that the little one had just torn off and felt touched. Food was the most precious thing to the little one. Smelling the enticing roast chicken's aroma and looking at the glowing chicken thigh, she gulped. Only then did she remember that she hadn't eaten anything for the whole day yet. It's super delicious. That's the only one. All for you. Amy tiptoed, trying to raise the chicken thigh even higher. Thank you, little Amy. Sally took the chicken thigh and bit into it right away. The crispy skin wrapped around the chicken flesh. The aroma only spread in the mouth after she bit into it. The tender chicken meat already leaped out urgently and her taste buds descended into a revelry. She hadn't had food that could be described as scrumptious for a long time now, and this chicken thigh aroused all her memory for Mamie Restaurant. This warm place was a place that produced delicious food at the same time. Oh! There was also a person who was great at creating delicious food. And a group of warm people. She looked at all the familiar and unfamiliar people standing at the restaurant's door. They felt like family when they were standing together. Chapter 2146 Marshall, you're not good at lying. Camilla looked at both of them with a weird expression. Babla and Connie's expressions were similar too. They knew their identities and it was indeed a little awkward for them to meet in a situation like this. I'll add a seat for you. Irina took out a folding chair and put it at a place that was slightly more spacious. Thank you. Sally nodded. She looked relaxed immediately and she sat down on the folding chair gracefully. Big sister Aisha. Anna came over and looked at Sally happily. Sally patted Anna's head and said with a smile, little Anna has grown taller too. I still haven't thanked you for the previous incident. Shirley sat next to Sally and sincerely said to her, thank you. You're welcome. Sally nodded. Looking at Shirley, Sally opened her mouth but she didn't say anything. This is Aisha, the restaurant's second employee and also the restaurant's second customer. Mag introduced Sally to the employees that were hired after she left and also introduced them to Sally. In Mamie Restaurant, she was still Aisha. At least, she was tonight. They are indeed women who can become princesses. They're all not simple. Camilla was secretly amazed by these two women's generosity. They could actually put down their feud and sit down for a meal together. This feast lasted until midnight and only ended after all the kebabs were devoured. Mag stood at the door and watched them leave. With a smile, he said, I hope all of you will have a bright future and you can be happy and blissful too. No matter where you are, or who you become, Mamie Restaurant will always be here and its door will always be open for you. The ladies looked at him, and they all smiled. All the smiling faces shone brighter than the starry sky. They even looked prettier too. Mag stood at the door and watched the ladies leave. Seems like you are really well liked by the ladies. Irina's voice sounded from behind him. Mag turned around and sighed gently. If you're talking about my culinary skills, then I'll admit that it is indeed an inconcealable talent. What if I said it's your mouth? Mag frowned and shook his head as he said, that is a little unreasonable. Apart from you, no one else would know that I'm very good with my mouth. Irina was stunned and then she suddenly realized something. She blushed, slapped him across his chest and said with a pout, smooth-tongued. That's a very apt description. Mag nodded and closed the door. This was a farewell dinner for those that were going to the battle, including Mag himself. This was a war that was beyond Mag's control. They would have to face the powerful Fulho and Rankster and the army of the dead that was under his control. Many people would die in this war and no one could guarantee who they would be. Connie would bring the Orcs Legion to the north personally. Camilla was also among the vampires' fighting forces. Babla would follow her master to the front line to set up the seal spell formation. Shirley had already applied to join the Night Elves combat forces. Gina would go into battle with Lantist and Sally would also go into battle with the Elves Legion. Mag would fight alongside them. But this time, he wouldn't use the identity of their boss. How amazing this situation was! When he first came to this world, Mag was only thinking about how to survive in this damned world with Amy, with his wretched body. But now, he was going to save this world together with his companions from the restaurant. Are you confident? Irina looked at Mag, who was daydreaming next to the window, and asked him softly from behind. Mag turned around and smiled at Irina. I've promised to make the Manchu Han Imperial feast for little Amy, but I'm still far from making it. What about me? Mag reached out and hugged her waist gently. I think little Amy is old enough now. Let's give her a little brother or a little sister when we return. Irina blushed with a mild anger. She looked up into his affectionate and tender eyes and her heart trembled. She nodded with an unexplainable emotion. You look like you have had a good rest. Helena's voice came from the room with the open door as soon as Sally returned to the city lord's castle's yard, which the elven delegation was staying in. The expression on Sally's face faded away. After a brief hesitation, she still walked into Helena's room. Helena looked at her and got straight to the point. Do you want to stay in the forest or go to the north? To the north, Sally replied without any hesitation. I need someone to take care of the rear. That someone cannot be me. Great. Your father wouldn't have ended up like this if he had half of your courage. Helena nodded with satisfaction. Sally was silent. She didn't want to be reminded of that man. In the yard next door in the study with closed windows and doors. Alex looked at Dominic, who was sitting across from him, and gravely said, Alex chose you as his assistant, so he will definitely ask you about the battle techniques. You have preserved the Roth Empire's power as much as you can. People of a different race cannot be trusted. This is an ancient saying. After a moment of silence, Dominic nodded and said, Your Majesty's wish is my command. Andrei was also quiet for a long time before he said, If you meet Josh on the battlefield, kill him. Don't let him live. Your Majesty, Dominic was shocked, but he quickly nodded. Yes. Early the next morning, Mag came to the city lord's castle and met up with Dominic. Just as Mag expected, the Roth Empire had already prepared 2 sets of war plans for the north before the meeting. One war plan was for the Roth Empire to fight the war alone if the negotiation failed, and the other was a detailed coordination of military operations and tactical plans after all the races united their efforts. The Roth Empire had very detailed information about the ice plain at the extreme north, including a recently drawn topographic map with every mountain and ravine marked out carefully. Mag read through the detailed tactics carefully before putting it down. You and I both know very well that this isn't the best plan. Mag looked at Dominic and shook his head in disappointment. Dominic was silent. Then, he nodded. This is the plan that we have prepared. Marshal, you're not good at lying. Mag chuckled. This is the plan that you've just changed last night, right? To prevent the loss of the Roth Empire's cavalry, many loopholes are added in. Loopholes that are fatal to the Allied forces. Dominic's expression froze on his face. I'm very disappointed. Mag shook his head. You should know very well that you're no longer the Roth Empire's marshal when you wrote this plan. You are the marshal of the entire Allied forces. No matter which race they come from, they are all your soldiers now. They're all fighting for this world. Chapter 2147. Have you seen our performance? I know this is his intention. As the Empire's marshal, you cannot refuse this request. Marshal broke the silence. He looked at Dominic and said, But, Marshal, you are now the deputy commander of the Allied forces and you have the responsibility of leading the Allied forces to protect the Norland continent. You're no longer just a marshal for the Roth Empire. Dominic looked up at Mag. Before becoming a soldier, we first swore to become a knight. The people we should protect are the weak. This was what you told me when we first met back then. Mag looked at Dominic. Now, the various races are very sincere in sending out reinforcements to aid the Roth Empire, forming the Allied forces to go northward. I am unable to accept it if you are still going to abide by your principles of putting the Roth Empire first. It's quite an irony that I am unable to put into action the words that I've lectured you all with. Dominic laughed at himself. After that, he had a serious expression as he stood up straight. I will resign from my duties as the Roth Empire Marshal and join this war as the Deputy Commander of the Allied Forces and do my very best. Mag stood up too. He looked at Dominic and said, happy working together with you, Marshal. Rodu, Romo Street. Saipan Tavern, a young lady dressed in a black Lolita dress stood in front of the tavern door as she looked up at the signboard, then at the tightly shut door in disappointment. 3 silver coins. After pulling through 2 days, Vicky finally came over to Romo Street with the paper. One would only know how costly the living expenses are if they are supporting the family. Vicky only understood this recently. There was no other choice. The people of Rodu did not know what opera was, so they would not spend a few copper coins to watch an opera performance. Of course, one of the reasons was also that the opera house was too run down. When she recruited the troupe members, she had huge ambitions and painted a beautiful picture for them. Now, they could barely feed themselves and were all hungry and skinny. There were 5 troupe members who left a letter behind this morning. They left without a word. They had gone to Macca Opera as they could have a full meal and sleep properly there. That was attractive enough. Right now, Pascal was using money to humiliate her and to attract the other troupe members. This had made Vicky decide to come here. When had she ever suffered such humiliation before? Compared to Pascal and that perverted young master, this uncle who could appreciate their performance was simply too amiable. If she had to make a choice, it would be this uncle. She could tell, judging from his attitude towards the 2 maidens, that he was not a bad person. However, the tavern was closed and there was even a sign hanging on the door that said that it would be temporarily closed. Sigh, Vicky sighed. She put her hand in her pocket and felt the few copper coins that she had left over after buying breakfast for her troupe members. If she only had porridge, it could last her a few more days. However, if 5 had left today and another 5 leave tomorrow, within days, she would be all alone. All her hard work within the last year would go to waste. She would not be able to face those members who had gotten their dreams and hopes up because of her. Hi, are you here for a drink? A voice came from behind Vicky. Vicky turned and saw a beautiful lady who was around 15 to 16 years old. I am here to look for the tavern uncle. It seems that he's not around, Vicky said disappointedly as she shook her head. Are you Vicky? Mela asked. Vicky's eyes lit up. She sized Mela up and asked, you know me? Have you watched our performances? Performances? I've not seen them. Mela shook her head. I see, Vicky was a little hurt. In that case, how do you know my name? It was Master. He told me that a young lady might be looking for him during these couple of days. Mela said with a smile, I saw you standing at the door for quite a while and it seemed to me that you had something to sort out, so I came over to ask. I see. Vicky nodded. She did not expect that uncle to remember what had happened. In that case, when is he coming back? I do have something important to talk about with him, Vicky inquired. He said he would be out for a few days but did not say when exactly he would be back. Vicky was slightly disappointed upon hearing that. Her troupe members would probably all be gone in another couple of days' time. Thank you. Vicky nodded to Mela and left. She had to go walk around the streets to see if there was any way to earn money. Perhaps she could sell a few things she brought from home. But she had already sold those things that could be sold and that which were left were what could not be sold. Money is a problem. Hold on. Mela called out to Vicky. Hey. Vicky looked at Mela curiously. My master told me to pass something to you before he left and even told me to bring you somewhere, Mela said. What's it? Vicky's expectations grew. I'm not sure either. Hang on for a while. Mela ran back to Titan Tavern and in no time at all, she brought out a paper bag and handed it over to Vicky. Vicky received the rather heavy paper bag and looked at Mela. She opened the bag immediately. There was a black money pouch inside, a bunch of keys, and a letter. Vicky opened the money bag. There were 50 glittering silver coins shining brightly at her. After that, she picked up the bunch of keys and was a little confused. "Let's go. I'll bring you to a place," Mela said as she walked off. Vicky quickly put away the things and followed behind her. Very quickly, Mela stopped in front of a house. This was a two-story house that was almost twice as large as the houses beside it. It was also slightly taller, being a two-story house that was almost as tall as a three-story house. The signboard was removed and the old-looking door was covered with dust. It must have been vacant for a very long time. "This is..." Vicky looked at Mela with confusion. "Master did not tell me anything." Mela shrugged. She looked at the keys in her hand and said, "But you can try to see if it opens up." Vicky went up, picked up the dusty lock and inserted the key. She turned the key gently. Click! The lock sprung open. Mela reached out and pushed the door open. Light shone into the place. A spacious hall appeared in front of her and there were dusty benches stacked in the corner. But Mela's eyes were fixed on the stage in the hall. Rays of light shone in from the windows onto the stage. The dust danced in the light, but that light shone a brilliance onto her dreams. However, why was this beautiful big sister so happy to see this old theatre? "Can I go in to take a look?" Vicky turned around to ask Mela. Mela nodded. "Master has already given the key. I don't think he would prevent you from entering." "Thank you," Vicky said and quickly walked into the theatre. The black boots stepped on the floor and stirred up a layer of dust, but Vicky didn't seem to care. She surveyed her surroundings as if she had just discovered treasure. The spacious hall was about 300 square meters big and the ceiling was about 6 meters tall. It looked very spacious. There were many windows at both the front and the back, which allowed the light to shine into the theatre. The stage was even extended upwards to the second floor. It even received more light and was rather spacious. There were even a few ropes left on the stage and claws marks could be seen across the floor. This should be a circus theatre and it was specially built for it. It doesn't seem bad. Vicky was ecstatic. This was almost the theatre of her dreams. Of course. It was the deformed dream that was battered by reality numerous times. It could shelter them from the weather, a respectable stage, designated seats for the audience and a small window to sell the tickets. That was enough. This place could satisfy all her requirements. Although it looked very dusty now, it was already glowing in her eyes. Did that gentleman want to let this place out to us? Vicky turned around to ask Mela at the door. Perhaps he mentioned it in the letter. Mela reminded her. Vicky quickly dug out the envelope from her pocket and took out the letter. "Dear Miss Vicky, I'm very happy that you can read this letter as this means that you have considered my suggestion. It's a pathetic era when artists cannot live and perform with respect. There are 50 silver coins here. It is a token sum from me and I hope it can resolve your current situation. I have even prepared building 101 for you. If you and your troupe are happy with it, it can be your performance venue. Of course, as a businessman, I hope to invest in your future. I will take 10% of the Black Cat Opera House's annual profit as my return. I won't interfere in the other matters. I hope you can consider it. If you agree, you can move into building 101 right away. If you cannot accept this condition, you may return the key to Mela. Hades." It was a short and concise letter. Vicky read through it twice, feeling a little conflicted. Are you stupid? Do you still have to consider such an angelic investor? Compared to that jerk who was after our body, isn't he much better? Vicky suddenly said in a rage. Hey! Mela was stunned and she looked at Vicky with shock. Did she scold herself whenever she got angry? Vicky immediately clutched the key in her hands tightly as though she was grabbing onto a lifeline. Her gaze became convinced too. Black Cat Opera House will restart right here. I will let everyone know that this world's best theater is right here. Vicky collected her emotions and walked out of the theater. She gave the letter to Mela and said, Mr. Hades has let us use this building temporarily. We're going to open the best opera house here. You guys are going to open an opera house here. Mela's eyes lit up and she perplexedly asked, what's an opera? Vicky looked sullen. That was the opera's current situation in Roder right now too. Maestro, 4 and Bayo have left too, a middle-aged man said unhappily as Vicky pushed open the door and walked into the dilapidated yard. The other actors were also looking at Vicky worriedly. Seeing her empty hands, they looked even more disappointed. Our Black Cat opera troupe is going to disband if this goes on, a thin and dark girl clenched her fists and angrily said, they're too ungrateful. They would have starved to death long ago if not for the maestro. How dare they betray us now? All of them fell silent with complex expressions. The weather had no signs of getting warmer and their tummies were always hungry. They didn't know if they could survive this winter if this went on. Vicky flicked a glance at all of them. She raised her pretty eyebrow with a hint of mild anger. She reached for her money bag at her waist, slammed it onto the table and yelled, why are all of you pulling a long face? Isn't it just money? See what this is. The glittering silver coins glowed brightly. All their eyes lit up and all the troupe members stared at the silver coins in the money bag on the table with disbelief. This. Maestro, where did you get the money from? The middle-aged man asked in a trembling voice. Maestro, did you sell yourself away? The dark and thin maiden asked sadly. All the troupe members looked at Vicky nervously with concern. They all knew about that rich young master who was pestering their maestro. However, their maestro had never liked him. However, other than him, they really couldn't fathom where the maestro could get so much money. What selling? I will sell you away before I sell myself away. Vicky rolled her eyes before she said with a smile, this money was given to us by that gentleman who came to watch our shows last time. Apart from money, he even provided us with a venue for our opera house. I have already agreed to work with him. Our hard life has ended. Really? We have a new opera house. We're finally leaving here. All of them were surprised and ecstatic. Some of them even cried. Vicky looked at them and her eyes were reddened as she laughed. Wiping away her tears, she said, all right. I have called 3 horse-drawn carriages and they're already waiting outside. Quickly pack up and let's move. I will bring you guys out to have a good meal later. Yes, everyone answered. They got whatever little baggage they had left over, extinguished the fire and left. So imposing. This is simply awesome. This stage. I love it. Outside of Building 101, the opera troupe members stared at the theater and its widely opened doors with wide open mouths and ill-concealed shock. Vicky couldn't help blaming herself when she looked at the 8 troupe members that remained. If she hadn't been so stubborn yesterday and had gone to look for that mister earlier, all of them would have been present here today. She didn't blame those troupe members who had left. Those who persevered with her till now were truly loyal. It was normal for those other members to have given up. Tummies that were filled with water couldn't be considered full. Vicky looked at the troupe members and said with a grin, from today onwards, this is our home. Let's start anew. All right, answered the troupe members while laughing too. All of them picked up their luggage and walked into the theater. They couldn't wait to find the cleaning tools from the utility closet and start cleaning up. Vicky found a short wooden plank. After wiping it clean, she wrote on it before hanging it on the door. Black Cat Opera House. Chapter 2149 The Donkey's Not Bad. The racial war back then was just 2 or 3 races fighting against one another. Although it looked messy, looking at it in isolation, there weren't many large-scale battles. Moreover, the Allied forces were formed at the very last minute. They didn't even trust one another fully, let alone having a tacit understanding. I'm afraid it will be difficult to control the situation if the defense line is broken through in such a setup. Dominic looked at the defense setup that was drawn in a straight line by Mag on the sand table. A simple line of defense isn't going to hold back the fearless charge by 1 million soldiers of the army of the dead, so I intend to have an opening here in these 3 ravines to let them in. I'm going to streamline the 1 million soldiers and stretch the battle line. There will be battalions of cannons and legions of magic casters stationed at both sides of the ravine to take out the army of the dead to the utmost extent. There will also be a line of ambush that resembles a pocket at the ravine's exit where spell formations and a massive military force are stationed. The giant dragon's legion will take the lead and kill the army of the dead from the sky with their air superiority. However, our final objective is to lure Thulhu out and into the spell formation, so that we can seal it. Once Thulhu is sealed, the army of the dead will lose their leader and the crisis will be averted. Mag fiddled on the sand table and created a new formation diagram. Dominic's eyes lit up and he walked around the scenario table twice before he said with a frown, "Such a setup can indeed block the army of the dead for a period of time, but how are we going to lure Thulhu into the seal?" The devil was mysterious and hard to predict. If the seal beyond Chaos City had shown them a glimpse, they wouldn't even know that there was such a terrifying being that was sealed up on the Norland continent. They had an immensely long lifespan that was even longer than the time that a single race had existed for. Even the giant dragons, who had a long lifespan, knew nothing about them either. They had terrifying power and couldn't be killed. They couldn't even be seriously injured. Only the seal spell formation that was passed down from the ancient times could seal them away. However, what a difficult task that was. Perhaps, their plan was only a joke in its eyes. I wonder if you have heard about the 1,000-layer cake theory before? Mag asked. A 1,000-layer cake? Dominic shook his head. What was this theory that sounded like a food? Mag revealed a mysterious smile. Thulhu has existed for eons. The wisdom it has must be beyond our imagination, but no matter how high its intelligence is, it still has to think when facing our traps. It might see that it's a trap, then it will move into the second layer by trying to escape the first layer. It thinks we are only at the first layer, but in fact we're at the 5th layer. Dominic nodded thoughtfully. After a period of silence, he couldn't help asking, "So, what's the 5th layer?" "You will find out when it's time." Mag smiled. "I'll leave the battle formation to you and you'll leave the traps and seal spell formations to me. My only requirement for you is to exterminate 200,000 soldiers from the army of the dead and make sure the line of defense doesn't break down." "All right." Dominic nodded seriously. If he didn't have such confidence with 1 million soldiers at hand, he would have wasted his decades of being the Empire's marshal. Mag went to see Michael to understand the progress of the cannon's production. With Miss Shear's full support, the cannon's daily production has already reached 300 and the artillery shells' daily production has reached 5,000. We have also gotten in touch successfully with the dwarves. Yesterday, 50 technicians arrived from the dwarves with the blueprints. They will supply us with the cannons at full force. The goblins have also promised to supply all the materials needed to make the cannons. When the dwarf race can produce a certain number of cannons daily, Chaos City will manufacture the artillery shells with full force and shut down the cannon's production line. Michael brought Mag around the cannon workshop as he introduced the production process to him. Miss Shear is really a big-hearted person. Mag nodded. His opinion of Shear had gone up another notch. Out of the chaos come the heroes. Although Shear was a woman, she had an extremely vast outlook and foresight. The train that had started to run became the best tool to transport the minerals. Freight trains shuttled between Vic Mountain and Chaos City, increasing the efficiency several times over. If the current situation wasn't in a mess and they weren't facing a great enemy, all the races would have noticed this smooth transport route. If the Norland continent could survive this episode, the train would lead in the development sector in the coming 100 years of peace. If you want to get rich, build the routes first. That was the truth. Furthermore, Shear had control of the Buffett Bank, had the first mover advantage and the core technology of the steam engine. She was the perfect money-making machine. Mag could even imagine himself lying on the shoulders of this giant and enjoying a life of financial freedom. Yes. In times of chaos, women are not inferior to men. Michael lamented and nodded. And, it's not just Miss Shear alone. Miss Gloria from the Moreton family had also come to the City Lord's castle 2 days ago to donate a huge batch of battle winter wear for the Allied forces. Gloria. Mag raised his brows slightly. Speaking of which, he hadn't met that maiden who liked to eat tofu pudding for some time. It was noon when Mag came out of the City Lord's castle. The sunlight landed on his face and it was a little glaring. The snow had almost melted and the new leaves had sprouted on the willows at the side. It looked like spring was approaching soon. Alex! A surprised voice called out. Mag retracted his gaze and looked at the knight who was pulling a black donkey. He had a square face and an emerald long sword at his waist. He had a bashful smile and a pair of bright eyes. Conti Nicholas. His name appeared in Mag's mind immediately. Thinking of it, Mag hadn't met him for a few months now. He looked a little darker and had a new long and narrow scar on the left side of his face that looked like a mark left by some magic beast's claws. There were also many scratches on his armor and it was no longer shiny. However, that pair of eyes of his were still cool and bright like a young man's. "Hello," Mag said to him. "I heard that you have stopped killing dragons. You're killing devils now, right?" Conti asked Mag excitedly. "It's indeed like that recently." Mag nodded. Conti smiled and bashfully said, "In that case, I have to join the Chaos City's Northern Expeditions Legion, in order to fight alongside you." Mag looked at him, and then at his black donkey and chuckled. "The donkey's not bad." Conti reached out to pat the black donkey's head and laughed. "It's my new ride, but it's indeed not bad." Bad. Chapter 2150 Master, are you abandoning me? Amy thought about it seriously. "I can play with Big Sister Mia and the ladies, Jessica and Daphne in Chaos City. It's more fun than Rodu." "It's indeed so." Mag nodded. Other than having a greater variety of food, Rodu wasn't that fun to the two children. However, he still needed a dependable employee before he could wash his hands off Saipan Tavern. However, being the supreme commander of the Allied forces now, he really didn't have the time to care if Saipan Tavern would lose its customers because its boss had gone away. "However, I can watch Miss Black Cat and Rodu. The big sister's performance is so nice. I want to watch it again." Amy pouted as she rubbed Ugly Duckling's chubby face in a dilemma. At that moment, someone knocked on the door. "I'll go get the door." Amy put Ugly Duckling down and ran to the door with her short legs. She tiptoed and struggled to pull open the door. Two strapping figures stood at the door. Amy looked up and went white when she saw who they were. She exclaimed, "Masters, are we starting school so early?" They were Krasu and Urian. "Hee hee. It's still a little early. Don't be nervous, little Amy. We're just here to test you on your recent homework. We want to see if you have slacked off during the holidays," Krasu said with a doting smile. "That's right." Urian nodded. Amy pouted and sadly mumbled, "Shouldn't we just play and have fun during the holidays? Why do I still have to work hard?" "I don't want to work hard." Her eyes got red as she spoke and tears gathered in her big eyes as if they were going to fall at any time. Krasu and Urian froze. Obviously, they were still helpless when the little one pretended to be sad. "Don't cry, don't cry. Master is just joking. We simply came to see little Amy because we haven't seen you for a long time." Krasu quickly waved his hands and nudged Urian with his elbow. "Isn't it so, Urian?" Urian rubbed his tummy secretly, but he still nodded. "Yes. Is it really so?" Amy looked at the two of them and instantly revealed a cute smile as she raised her hands up and said, "I've super missed you two masters." "Really? Looking at the smile on their little disciple, Krasu and Urian couldn't help but smile too. Mag came out from the kitchen and said to the two of them, "You guys are here, masters. Come and have a seat. I guess you two haven't had your meals yet. Why don't you guys eat together with us since I'm cooking?" "We have, yes, what a coincidence. We haven't eaten yet. I feel rather shy to impose on you guys." Krasu was already sitting at the table as he spoke. Urian flicked a glance at him and frowned, but he also sat at the table. "Please wait a while. I still have 2 more dishes to cook." Mag poured them a glass of water each, before going back to the kitchen to continue cooking. These two were usually intolerant of each other. They must have some issues that made them come visit Mag together today. Mag listened to their conversation while he cooked. "Come over here, little Amy." Krasu got Amy to go over. He held her hand and sized her up for a while, before he nodded with satisfaction. "Although there's not much improvement, your face has gotten rounder and you look cuter." Urian rolled his eyes and tapped Amy's glabella gently. A snowflake blossomed at her glabella before rapidly transforming into an ice crystal which hovered in front of her forehead. "Not bad. You'll be able to use the real domain after some time." Urian retracted his hands and nodded at the 5-pointed crystal with satisfaction. "I practice very hard every day," Amy said with a smile as she listened to her master's praises. Mag also smiled in the kitchen. Even though the little one loved to eat and sleep, she did practice consciously for 2 to 3 hours each day. Compared to her peers, she was already a hard-working role model. Krasu began to heap praises on Amy, making her extremely happy. "Little Amy, Master has something to give you. You must keep them well." Krasu took out a green space magic bracelet. With the snap of his fingers, a photo stone and a thick book appeared on the table. Amy picked up the photo stone to have a closer look before sizing up the thick book and asked, "Master, what are these?" Krasu introduced the items with a smile. "Master has specially recorded some magic tutorials for you in this photo stone. This book is the record of melee magic that I have just written. There is only one in this world." "Oh." Amy nodded and sized up the 2 items curiously, but she quickly put them down and looked up at Krasu. "Master, are you abandoning me?" Mag also stopped cooking in the kitchen. Krasu shook his head and said, "Why would I? Little Amy is so adorable. How can Master bear to abandon you? Then, why are you giving me all these things? Are you not going to teach little Amy magic? Little Amy will be hard-working. Don't give up on little Amy, please." Amy looked at Krasu anxiously. Tears had already gathered in her eyes. "It's not like that, little Amy. Master needs to go on a long trip. I'm afraid that you won't work hard, so I'm leaving you with these 2 items. I hope you will have become more powerful by the time Master returns. By then, I will personally test if you have worked hard." Krasu rubbed Amy's head with a smile. "Really?" Amy sniffled and looked at Krasu with suspicions. "It's true." Urian raised his hand and an ice blue ring appeared on the table, alongside an ice crystal mirror that looked like a snowflake. "Little Amy, these are the things that I'm leaving to you. Your affinity with ice magic is far above me, so your accomplishments in the future will definitely surpass mine." Urian looked at Amy and smiled with consolation. "The happiest thing I did in my whole life is taking you in as my disciple." Then, when are you guys coming back?" Amy asked the 2 of them. "Very soon. Perhaps, we'll return when your school reopens," Krasu answered with a smile. Urian nodded as well. A smile reappeared on Amy's face. Nodding her head seriously, she said, "Yes. I will study magic very, very hard. You two will be shocked when you are back." "All right. We'll wait for it." Krasu chuckled. Mag carried the dishes out, took a bottle of Mao Tai from the liquor cabinet and said with a smile, "Masters, it's rare for us to get together. Why don't we have a drink?"